Lately, I've been trying to send you stories every day, but I feel like a large number of people who have signed up almost never come back to listen to the stories. I don't know where that is. Make you unhappy? I hope to receive comments and suggestions from you, and if you find the video good, please give me a like to give me more motivation. For those who have not yet subscribed, don't forget to click the subscribe button and press notification bell to wait for the next story. Now let's get into the story. Story 1. It was my junior year of high school and I was new. Most people were very friendly and honestly, regardless of this negative experience I had, I still think it was the best school I ever went to. I ended up hanging out with the skateboarders. Most of them were decent enough guys. We always had a great time listening to music and hitting up our local McDonald's after school. One of my best friends, Matt, had a twin brother named Will. Will, for some reason, didn't like me at all and was always rude to me. I tried asking Matt one time why Will hated me so much and he just said something along the lines of, "That's just how he is." Whatever, it wasn't my problem and I never did anything to cause it, so I let it go. During the next school year, I met a guy named Jesse. Jesse was odd, but he seemed harmless enough, so I wasn't too worried in the beginning. We rarely talked and were mostly just acquaintances until one day, he came up to me the hallway, handed me a note, and walked away. I was confused but headed to my class before I got a chance to read the note. When I got settled in at my desk, I opened the note. It was mostly nonsensical. He said things like, "I want to watch you get into arguments with your mom. You're really pretty. I think we'd be good together." And the strangest one, "I want to watch you play Uno by yourself." It wasn't until the end that I felt the wave of chills through my body. The last one said, "I want to watch you in your room from outside your window." He ended the note with his signature and his phone number. No way. This had to be a joke. No one would write something so weird and be serious. I let it go and my friends reassured me that he was just kind of weird. Will made fun of me for it. He found it hilarious. Jesse began showing up around my locker. It started out small, with him just being there one period. Then it turned into every period. Every time I was there, he popped up somewhere in the hall. Our lockers were on separate sides of the school. We had no classes together, and there was really no reason why he would be showing up all the time. But he always made his presence known somehow. Sometimes I would feel somebody watching me and look around to see him somewhere in the hall, sometimes just standing there staring at me. I absolutely hate being stared at. It makes me uncomfortable. There's no particular reason. It's just always bothered me. I just tried to ignore him and assumed it was part of his weird crush that he had on me, until he followed me home one day. He didn't talk to me, just watched me walk to my house, which was down the street from school. He stood across the street until I walked inside. Then he went back to the school to get home, wherever that was. I knew he never went that way and was thoroughly creeped out. I never told anyone, but I knew that he was aware of where my house was now. Was he going to show up? Would he watch me outside my window like he wanted to? I never saw him near my house again, but I was still freaked out. A couple of weeks later I found a picture in my locker. It was hand-drawn and signed with Jesse's signature. The picture was creepy, with an angry-looking snowman full of stab wounds that bled into a pile around the bottom of it. I was really freaked out, but again I let it go. I wasn't sure what I could even do. Thinking back, I should have told the teacher or the principal that I wasn't the type to make waves and assumed that he was just playing some kind of weird, sick joke. I showed my friends again, and they said it was creepy. They asked me if I wanted them to talk to Jesse for me, but I declined, again not wanting problems. After all, I was new at the school. But Will didn't make fun of me this time though. He looked angry when he saw it, but never said anything to me about it. After a couple more weeks, during study hall, I asked my teacher if I could go to the hall to read since it was too distracting with other kids talking. He let me go, and I headed out. Will was sitting against the lockers, also wanting to get away from the noise. He looked up at me, then back down to his book. Typical Will. I sat a few lockers down and got comfortable to start reading my book. From down the hall, I heard footsteps coming our way. I didn't look up since it's a pretty high traffic area because the bathrooms are close by. The footsteps stopped right in front of me, and I looked up to see Jesse looking down at me with a smile on his face and a folded up piece of paper in his hand. He leaned it down and gave it to me. When I opened it, I was immediately upset all over again. It was another drawing, this time a Care Bear with a butcher knife in one hand, and his heart in the other, and a huge bloody hole in his chest. I looked up at Jesse, and he just smiled down at me in the most sinister way. I didn't know what to say, but I didn't have to. Will saw the picture, and how upset I was. He stood up and walked over to Jesse, grabbed him by the shirt, and slammed him against the lockers. "Leave her alone, and don't ever talk to her again, or I'll beat the life out of you," Will told Jesse. I was completely dumbfounded. Will hated me. He never said one nice thing to me. Jesse was equally surprised by the reaction, as he barely knew Will. He mumbled something and walked away, but he never bothered me again, but still occasionally showed up around me at my locker. We never spoke after that, though. I didn't get any more interesting notes or pictures, and he never followed me home again. I was thankful to the rudest person I knew for standing up for me and stepping in when I felt that I couldn't. I have grown into my own, having no problem standing up for myself, but I am still thankful to Will for what he did. I never got to tell him, but I think he knew. Story 2. I'm turning 22 at the end of the month, and this event happened almost a decade ago, yet I still remember it so clearly. I still think on it often, and bring it up to my family, as uncomfortable as it makes us. It reminds us on how dangerous the world really is. As a little backstory, growing up I'd always had extremely fair skin, blonde hair, and light eyes. The kind of thing that specific creeps unfortunately go for. When I was just around the bend of becoming a teenager, my older sister, who's 8 years older than me, was in the military, and had been gone for quite some time now. However, she was finally coming back home to good old USA soil, a few states away at a base in Kentucky. My parents and I were excited, and planned to leave for the weekend, so we could finally go and see her for the first time in years. It would only be a few days, but we were happy regardless. We ended up seeing her, of course, and had a few days to be able to go out to meet, open her accumulated Christmas presents, and go to a nearby mall in proximity to the hotel that we had been at. I've never seen someone so happy to just wear normal civilian clothes. Right from the get-go, our last night together felt odd as we walked this mall. Just one of those creepy vibes you get from an unfamiliar area. It wasn't too long until closing, and at this time frame, malls close at around 10 p.m. I'm sure you know what happens at malls. You go in, and you look at everything. The four of us came across the last store we would be stopping at for the night before leaving. We walked in, and it's not particularly a store we'd go into. Expensive streetwear clothing. Like the pesky 12-year-old I was, I go back and forth pestering my mom and dad, walking around the store as my sister looks around as well. Suddenly, my sister walks over to my mom as I'm near my dad and whispers something to her. A man with the most defined black mustache I remember had been tailing us and doing the typical retail routine. "Hi, is there anything I can help you with? Can I help you find something?" But he's being too persistent and only asking my dad these things. The man didn't speak broken English, but his accent was incredibly thick. Perhaps Indian or Turkish, we think. My sister and mother walked out of the store and keep eyeing back at my dad. "Be all right, let's go now look." Now me being 12, feeling even worse vibes. I don't understand why my mom and sister are wanting to leave so bad, but I start to catch up to them regardless. As my dad starts noticing us leaving, he begins to walk out as well, but the man stops him as I'm still in earshot. I find out at this point that the man has been staring at me almost the whole time with my aloofness to the situation. He looks away from me and to my dad and asks, "So how much for the little one?" My dad, visibly confused, chuckles uncomfortably thinking it's some kind of weird tasteless bad joke. My mother and sister don't hear this and are still waiting for my dad and myself to catch up several feet away. "What?" my dad says, hoping for some kind of explanation. The man proceeded to say that he wanted to purchase me. Visibly protective dad mode now and realizing the man is completely serious. "We don't do that here." His rising tone was palpable. He starts to hurry me away to my mom and sister, and we start leaving as he tells them just what happened. The whole drive back to the hotel, my sister is just constantly getting more and more upset, saying if she had known, she would have killed him. And honestly, I'm not sure that there's really anything we could have done. But regardless, the entire situation was beyond uncomfortable, especially now that I realize the implications of what was going on. Needless to say, we never stepped foot in that store again. Story 3. This happened about 15 years ago. At the time, I was dating around and I had a few creepy encounters during that time. But this guy takes the cake. He was an acquaintance that my brother had met at a bar a few times and was showing around the local area because he was new to the country. My brother set us up because he was apparently desperate for a girlfriend. And I guess I was pretty desperate too, because we went on a date together. That date was probably the worst date I've ever had. I showed up to the restaurant where we were meeting at. He was late, which isn't a huge deal, so I let it slip and we went to sit down. To be honest, I knew from the start I wasn't really attracted to him, but I thought I would be polite and see if we had a nice night. He started off polite too. He held the door for me, pulled my seat out. It wasn't really necessary, but it was nice anyways. Then, when we were sitting down waiting for someone to come and take our orders, I was reading the menu, and he started talking about how much his fiancée would have liked this place. That took me by surprise, and naturally, I asked him about his fiancée. He revealed that he had a fiancée before moving over here, but he had just left her to move to another country. I asked why they had broken up, and he said they never really broke up as such, but he got fed up of her nagging him about various things, so he moved away. I really didn't know what to say after that, so I changed the subject and started asking him more about himself and where he used to live. He wasn't really very forthcoming. Eventually, our waiter came and started talking to us. To clarify for the next part, our waiter was a man of color, and he had an unusual accent for our area. So my date stares blankly at him for a while, then turns to me and says, "You understand this guy?" I said that yes, I could understand him, before telling him our orders. After he left, my lovely date continued to shock me. He said, "I wouldn't normally leave ordering to the lady, but that brown guy talked really weird, and I didn't get it." Wow, way to tell me that you're a racist and a sexist in one breath. Again, I was speechless for a few moments before I got angry with him. I don't remember exactly what I said. It was something along the lines of, "Well, I'm not a lady, so I can order for myself just fine, thanks, and why make racial remarks?" Then he got annoyed with me and told me that he wasn't being racist. He just wasn't used to that kind of person where he was from. I pointed out that he wouldn't have met me if he just stuck to people he was used to in his own country. He did calm down then and told me that he wouldn't want that, because he's glad he met me. Honestly, I found that a little weird, given that I didn't see any way to say that this date wasn't going well, and he didn't know me very well at all. But I decided since we had ordered, I should stay and get my meal, and try to redeem the evening before I leave and never see this man again. So I answered some of his questions about me, basic getting to know me questions and small talk stuff for the most part, then started on about my previous dates, if I was a virgin, whether I would be willing to wait until marriage and then be submissive to my husband or not. It was at this point I realized that I was most likely on a date with a religious bigot, hence the misogyny, weird attitude to sexual stuff, and all his other closed-minded bullcrap. So I settled for a none of your business. Now I need to leave. I checked the prices on the menu and left money for my half of the food, plus a tip, on the table and got up to leave. He said he didn't see why I was being unreasonable with him, as though this had been a normal date, then told me that I couldn't expect him to take my money, because that was an insult to him. Fine, you want to pay for a meal that's not getting eaten, you pay for it. I'm not that mad about spending my money, that'll stop you. So I took my money back and walked straight out. I just assumed that yes, it was an awful evening, but I wouldn't have to see him again at least. I was even back to my house when my brother started texting me, asking where I was because my date had called him in tears, saying I had gone off for no reason and he didn't know where I was or what to do. Thankfully my brother was pretty calm about it and assumed that I had left for a reason. I explained everything to him and he was pretty surprised too. After that night we both tried to cut contact. My brother stopped meeting up with the guy and we both blocked the Facebook account we had for him too. My brother also blocked his number because he would not stop texting him asking about me, alternating between being really worried about me to saying he hoped I dropped dead. Then he started making endless different accounts on social media to harass us. He told my brother he didn't know why we weren't talking to him. He posted a bunch of weird posts describing me in detail before going on to call me a lot of horrible names. We kept blocking them and moving on. Then the harassment got worse. He either found me and followed me at some point or got my address from a friend and turned up one day, standing around outside my house, asking to come in and speak to me. When I refused to let him in, he grabbed my mom to prevent me from going in either and started to tell me that he didn't want me to go in because I would never find a man who loved me like he did and that if I walked away from him again I would regret it one day when I was old and lonely. He went on and on like this for ages and ages while I tried to pull my arm away from him before I got fed up with this and yelled at him to get off of me and leave me alone, and then I kicked him in the shin. He let go of my arm but cursed at me and said I was being ungrateful to him, but I took my opportunity to run inside and lock my door. He started banging on my door, then trying to push it inwards. I was getting both upset by this man and just super fed up of his presence in my life, so I grabbed my phone and called the police, telling them that someone was trying to get into my house. I was told someone would be there with me soon, but 20 to 30 minutes later there was no sign of them anywhere, and I was getting quite upset because this man was forcing my door and I thought the lock was going to break soon, so I called my brother who lives nearby just because I knew he would come, even though I wasn't sure he'd be much help. About 15 minutes later my brother turns up, and after a brief conversation I didn't quite hear outside. The pressure was gone off the door. I waited a few minutes and then texted my brother to see what was going on and if it would be alright to look outside now. He didn't reply, and the next thing I heard was the police turning up. I went out to see what was going on. Apparently, after my initial call, they had received another call from a neighbor saying that there were two men fighting on my lawn. I guess this was my brother and the guy, since my brother looked out of breath and pretty shook up, and the guy wasn't around anymore. My brother explained to the police that he had tried to stop the man from getting into my house and then the man had hit him. I told my side of the story, and some of my other neighbors were asked what they had seen and were able to tell them about his attempts to get in. Plus there were marks on the outside of my door where he had been trying to repeatedly get in. The police went to look for him, and a few weeks after I called and told them, and they told me they thought they had found him, but when they wanted me to look at the suspect person, it wasn't the same man. I didn't hear anything else, and I don't know whatever happened to him. I didn't see him again, so I'm probably safe after 15 years, but regardless, I don't ever want to see him again. Story 4. This story happened to me when I was in the 5th grade, so about 15 years ago, when I was about 9 or 10. As a disclaimer, I'm not good at confrontations, and some pretty stupid decisions were made. It was Christmas Eve. We were getting ready to go across the street to my grandmother's house for dinner and presents. My mom was in charge of the dessert, which only needed to be drizzled with some sort of sweet sauce from a can. We didn't have this last ingredient, so my mom asked me to go to the store to get one. This was in Mexico, where people can quite literally open up little miscellaneous stores in their homes, slap a name on it, and you had an establishment. So I walked to the store, which was located on the same spot where my house was, but on the street behind it. There was a tree in my backyard from where I could see the 2-story house that doubled as the store, so to get there I had to walk to the corner, turn left, go to the next corner, and turn left again. On the street perpendicular to both my street and the stores there was a house with a lot of vegetation on its front lawn. We used to call it the jungle. It had a tall concrete fence and a wooden door, so you couldn't actually see the house, only the outside, and a bunch of greenery in the yard. On my way back home I was daydreaming, and I didn't notice this drunk, homeless-looking oldish man in his 50s standing by the wooden door that leads to the jungle. I looked up about 3 meters before I would have quite literally run into him, and I sort of yelped a little because he scared me. He was looking at me and smiling, slightly swaying. He says, "Hi. Hello. How are you doing?" "I'm okay." "Nice to meet you," and he puts his hand out for a handshake, and I actually shake his hand. After this creep shakes my hand, I try to pull it back, but he wouldn't let it go. By now he's pretty close to me, asking me if I wanted to come with him. I'm freaking out, so I don't really remember exactly what he said. I was trying to look for an excuse to get home, and I told him I did not want to go with him, but my dad would get mad and go look for me if I didn't go home immediately. He agreed, told me to ask my dad for permission to go with him, and let me go. I speed walked back home, scared that he would change his mind and follow me. When I got home, I left the can of whatever sauce I bought on the table and headed straight to my room. My mom asked me what was wrong because I was pretty shaken up, but I was scared of telling her, and I just went to my room. My dad then walked in, I suppose because my mom asked him to find out what happened, and I told him everything. My mom was by the door, so she heard it all, and I swear I had never seen my mom so furious. She went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and put it in the front pocket of the sweater she was wearing. She told me to walk to the exact spot where it happened, and that they were going to walk behind me out of sight, I guess to catch the guy. I remember being really scared walking by myself again, but knowing my parents were behind me made it a little better, but the guy wasn't there. We walked around to try and find out where he had gone, but we were never able to find him, and we went back home. Honestly, I don't know what my parents would have done if we had found him anyway. Apparently, the description I gave my parents matched a pretty well-known addict that lived by and around the neighborhood. Years later, I heard that he had died of an overdose, which made me less paranoid when leaving my house, at least until we moved. So creepy addict, homeless, creepy dude. I think the universe that we'll never meet again. Story 5. When I was about 13 or 14, this new guy called Jack came to my school. Now it had a fairly large body of students, and it was situated in a heavily populated neighborhood, so no one really made a big deal out of new people. But he was quite shy and looked out of place, so I thought it would be nice if I introduced myself to him just to show him around and make him less uncomfortable. Oh boy, was I in for a ride. Jack was very tall and had a rather large frame for his age. At first, he didn't come off as creepy, just a little bit on the awkward side, but then again, that's not really out of the ordinary for hormone-ridden preteens, so no flags were raised. I don't really remember what we used to talk about at first, but he would always be around to make sure to say hi to me, and specifically me, as in he would say my name even if I was with a group of friends he had talked to before. Looking back, I'm pretty sure he might have liked me, but I was never really into guys, so I didn't notice it at all. Things started to get weird when our art teacher gave us an assignment to decorate the covers of our sketch pads with something that we really liked and or were passionate about. Mine was probably some crappy band I listened to at the time. His was a picture of an open heart surgery. Not an illustration, not a fictional heart surgery, an actual literal picture of a human heart in all of its gory fashion. The teacher, much like everyone else, was very put off by it and probably had a private conversation with him, but as far as I remember, he was still allowed to keep it at a sketch pad even if it was a little bit on the graphic side. Later, I approached him and asked why that picture exactly, and he told me that he was really into cardiology and binge-watched surgery videos on the internet and wanted to study it in college. That's still pretty weird that he would choose such an explicit image, but I guess at least it makes a little bit of sense. Right? Wrong? In the subsequent weeks, he would go on and on about how he's working a part-time internship at a hospital downtown because his grandma works there. Apparently she was a nurse and pulled some strings to get him into the medical world since he liked it so much. He even went as far as to wear scrubs to school one day. Obviously it wasn't true. No one in their right mind would let a 13-year-old work at a hospital. That just wouldn't happen. He seemed to believe it though, or at least he believed that he wanted me to believe it. I really don't know what was going on in his mind. At some point he asked me if I wanted to see some tools that they used at the hospital, to which I said sure. Why not? Because A, I didn't think he was being serious, and B, I was starting to get scared that if I didn't play along things wouldn't go so well for me. And to my absolute surprise, he did bring a bunch of medical tools to school. Scalpels, scissors. The kid had an entire dissection kit in his bag. I'm not sure if he brought them or stole them from his grandma. I'm leaning more towards the latter, but it's needless to say that I was, and this is no overstatement, freaked out. I still don't know why he thought bringing them to school of all places would be a good idea. But then again, we never hung out outside of class, which in retrospect was probably for the best. So he must have thought that this was his only chance to wow me with his extensive knowledge of all things surgery. I, of course, after pretending that everything was fine and that what he did was totally normal, reported it to the principal, and they called his grandmother, who was just as shocked as everyone else to find out that her grandson had did this. I don't know what went down, but as far as I remember, he got off without consequences, and also this happened nearing the end of the school year, and after that I moved to a different place for unrelated reasons, so I didn't really think about checking. Thankfully, he didn't try to hurt me or anyone else, and I think he just genuinely thought it was acceptable to bring a bunch of potential weapons to school. But I can't help but wonder what could have happened if I got on his bad side or didn't pretend to go along with this fantasy world. He was notoriously volatile, and I guess I was just lucky he liked me. I'm pretty sure he was mentally ill. I know that he was at least depressed, because so was I, and we briefly talked about it back then, but now I think that he was clearly delusional. This was almost a decade ago, so people avoided talking about mental illness like the plague, and the school probably didn't investigate it any further or pointed his family in a good direction, which, to be quite frank, really sucks. So yeah, creepy kid from middle school. I genuinely hope we're doing better, but I'll never forget our interactions, and not in a good way. Story 6. So this happened around 4 or 5 years ago, when I was in high school as a freshman when I was 14. A little context. When I started high school, I was very shy and introverted, but somehow ended up becoming really close friends with the prettiest and most popular girls at school. So these 3 girls were all used to being the center of attention, and it didn't bother them. It was about the end of December, and our exams for the semester were finally over that day. To celebrate, us 4 decided to go to the nearby mall and see a movie. It was the first time we had all gone out together instead of hanging out at school, so we were very excited. Even I ended up dressing up and putting on makeup. We get our tickets. We're laughing. We're having fun when one of the girls suggests that we go and get snacks from the market inside the mall because it's much cheaper than the ones that are at the movie theater. Makes sense. So we went 3 or 4 floors down to buy some gummy bears and whatnot. Now the thing is, I have anxiety and a very strong instinct, but when you have both, people usually don't tend to believe you and say it's the result of your anxiety. When we entered the big market, I immediately felt that something was wrong. I ignored it, for I didn't want to ruin our first proper night out. The girls headed towards the drinks first, and that's when I noticed them in the drink aisle. There were these 2 guys looking at us while talking and laughing. All while doing that, and the time it took for me and my friends to pick up the drinks, they never once broke their stare, nudging and whispering to each other. One of them was well over 6 feet and seemed pretty strong. The other was blonde. He was shorter, but he was still taller than the 3 of us. I was uncomfortable with their stares, but I just figured it's men being disgusting perverts, and I urged my friends to move on. When we moved to the next aisle, I saw them again not a minute after us. They stood at one end while we were at the other, still looking straight at us, their whispering now seemingly more heated. I grew really anxious at that and quietly pulled one of the girls aside and told her that I thought these dudes were following us. My friend says we're four pretty girls, it's normal for guys to look at us, you're just being paranoid. She flipped her blonde hair while saying that, leaving me behind and moving to the next aisle. I had no intention of being left alone with those guys, so I followed after them very quickly. We went 2 aisles over, and each time they followed us. Whenever I tried to see what they were doing discreetly, their gazes would be upon us. The smaller blonde had one of the creepiest grins on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. The tall one was smiling, but I can't forget the fact that he kept licking his lips. I was growing more and more anxious at this point, but the final straw was when we moved to the register to pay for our things. They came to the register right across from us. When I looked up, the blonde one winked at me, still with that smug grin plastered on his face. The friend that I talked to a little earlier saw it as well. "I think you're right, they are following us," she whispered into my ear, and we told the other girls this as well. It was about 9 p.m. at this point, and our movie would start in half an hour, so the floor we were on was getting less crowded with each minute. There was a cosmetic shop right across from the register that we were at. We decided to go there because it was the closest place, and B guys wouldn't go into the small cosmetic shop. We bagged our items, paid, and dashed into the store before the guys could move. Hoping that they would leave us alone, now we waited and pretended to look at some nail polishes. Instead of leaving like we thought they would, they started pacing in front of the store waiting for us to come out. We thought about getting the store manager to call the mall security, but we knew that the security here sucked, so we didn't call them. The 4 of us stayed there waiting to see if they would leave, but they didn't. They just kept pacing left and right looking at us. The way the mall is designed, when you get out of the shop where you are, you can either go left or right. If you went left, you'd walk into a long hall. Take another left, and there would be the escalator. If you took a right, though, there were only bathrooms at the end of a hall, and it was pretty empty and dark. If those guys got us there, I knew that that would be it, so we decided to make a run for it. When the men passed the store for what felt like the millionth time, we took off running towards the escalators. I dared to look back and saw the 2 guys behind, not running like we were, but following us fastly. Had it not been for the fact that we had to run up the 4 stairs and lose these guys as fast as we could, I would start sobbing right then and there. After that, I didn't dare look behind me, and we just kept running until we got to the doors of the movie theater and threw ourselves in. There was a security guard there, so we told him everything. We gave descriptions in case they figured where we went, and waited. They didn't come after us, though. Maybe we lost them. Maybe they decided that the trouble wasn't worth it. As the sense of safety kicked in and the adrenaline left, I had such a panic attack that I don't even remember the movie that I was excited to see. When the movie was over, we peeked our heads out, but fortunately the guys were gone. We went home and never had to deal with them again. Story 7. I'm pretty sure I'm being stalked, and I have been for the last 2 years. This story starts around the fall of 2017. I was walking back to work from lunch when I passed this girl and noticed that she got up and started walking behind me. She took a different route and didn't follow me. A few days later it happened again, but this time she was following me. I assumed she wasn't following me at the time because where my office building is situated, you have to go up a set of stairs and pass a few other buildings, and she did not follow me to my building. After a while, I noticed we took the same train home. A lot of the time she would be watching me. When we made eye contact, she would look away, then she would continue looking when she thought that I wasn't. There's a Whole Foods across from my office. I went there for lunch a couple times during the week. I started seeing the girl sitting in the window for lunch, and she would almost always get up as soon as I left and walk the same way I did. Around this time I began seeing her more frequently. During lunchtime or when I go to the metro, she was almost always there. After a couple of months of this, I started noticing that she would get off at the same station as me sometimes. Sometimes she would walk the same way as me. Once I got to my condo where I lived with my brother, she would always pass but never follow me up to the entrance. During this time, I started receiving phone calls at work from random phone numbers that at the time I assumed was spam. There would either be silence on the end or the person would hang up immediately. I also started receiving fake Facebook requests from people I already knew or were already on my friends list. December of 2017 comes, and by this time I'm not going to Whole Foods as often. If she gets off at the same station as me, I go into a restaurant or go shopping for groceries before I go home. Around this time, an old friend that I went to high school with contacts me out of the blue. She started following me on Instagram. We text a couple of times and I accept her follow request. She contacts me again about a month later from a different number, but this time she's texting me frequently. I'm talking about every other day. I'm not one to be mean or show when I'm annoyed too often, but after months of this, when she asks me if she's texting me too frequently, I do not hesitate to tell her that she could lay off a bit. She stops for a week or so, but then starts texting frequently again. This whole ordeal should have sent red flags up for several reasons. During this time, she would ask me so many random questions, like how you would if you were trying to get to know somebody. She would ask for selfies, which I declined because I don't like taking pictures of myself, and I would tell her that there are plenty of pictures of me on Facebook. She would ask what I'm doing on the weekends and the names of my friends on occasion, which I wouldn't tell her because I thought it was weird that she'd want to know my friends' names. I only sent her a couple of videos of fun things I do, but that's it. August 2018 rolls around. I'm still seeing creepy girl everywhere during the week. I get pulled into my boss's office. He says that a few co-workers received fake screenshots from Facebook of me talking badly about them. Now, I never post on Facebook. I would never talk crap about my co-workers on social media. Don't have a grudge with anyone, nor do I know of anyone who has a problem with me. I'm fairly easygoing. I managed to clear things up with everyone involved, and I still have my job. Of course, my friend is still texting me fairly frequently, and I tell her what had happened. A couple of days later, when I got home from work, I tell her I don't want to get too much into it, but she keeps pushing me for details. I finally told her I was going to bed, and she got the message. The more I thought about all the times she would text me, the more uneasy I got. Some things that she said just didn't make sense, especially from the way I remembered her. We had kept in touch over the years, but just not as frequently, and we hadn't touched base for a while before I heard from her back in December. A couple of weeks later, I decided to reach out to my friend on Instagram, but the Instagram she last messaged me through wasn't there. However, there still was an Instagram for her that I followed, and that followed me back. I reached out to her and asked her what her phone number was. The phone number is completely different, and it turns out that she was never the one texting me, nor did she follow me on Instagram. I tracked the number, and it turns out to be from one of those fake phone number accounts. I requested to be blocked from the service, and I never hear from my friend again. After talking about it with my brother and a couple of friends, I'm almost 100% certain it was the girl that was following me. These things only started after she appeared. The phone calls to my office, the fake Facebook requests. A few days before I was pulled aside by my boss, my friend texted me and told me she had a weird feeling about me and wanted to make sure that I was okay. I just thought she was being weird at the time and didn't think too much of it. This whole ordeal is really scary when I look back on it because I sent videos of myself and my address at one point. My friend even confirmed a post my brother made with pictures he tagged of me on Facebook. I was texting a stranger for 8 months about my life, and they also apparently have access to my Facebook page. I still see this girl since she obviously works in the same area as me. She doesn't follow me around as much, but when she does see me on the metro, she always watches me or sits somewhere that she will be able to make eye contact with me. I'm always careful now if anyone texts me from an unrecognizable phone number, and I'm just paranoid. I know this story might seem a little bit all over the place, especially with the conclusion I came to of the girl posing as my friend, but I had to get this off my chest because that girl still freaks me out to this day. Story 8. So this was perhaps the strangest day I'd ever experienced. It is honestly so surreal and bizarre that I really don't know how else to talk about it. I was 12 at the time, which was 6 years ago, and was going school supply shopping with a friend before the start of 8th grade. I had to take the subway to her house, and my parents didn't actually let me take the subway since it was quite a bit more dangerous than it is now, though I insisted on it, and my parents finally let me go. I was always really aware on the subway, and this was all before the Me Too movement, and at 12-13 I had already been preyed on by various sexual predators on the subway. Men grabbing my thighs, lifting up my skirts. I thought I could handle them, although they did scare me a lot, so I had to transfer to this above-ground station, and as I was standing there minding my own business, I noticed a man down the station who was harassing women in perhaps the most unusual way I've ever seen. He was wearing Valentine's boxers, a white beater that was stained yellow with sweat, and a massive styrofoam cowboy hat. He had a massive handlebar mustache. He kind of looked like Eggman from Sonic. He had a giant pillow shaped like a salmon with a salmon design printed on it. He had this all held up with guitar straps. He was chasing women down the platform by spitting on them or clicking at them as a cowboy would do to a horse. I froze up and was absolutely terrified, though also in a bit of awe. Who was this guy? My train came and I realized that I had to walk past him to get onto it. I walked slowly and tried my best not to make eye contact with him, though the clicking began, and I found myself running as fast as I could until I jumped onto the train. I found a seat but realized that he had gotten on as well. Fortunately, the train was very crowded and he got a bit distracted clicking at not underage women. I don't remember exactly what happened, as I think I was in a bit of shock, but some kind of fight broke out after some guy stole his styrofoam cowboy hat and started tearing it apart. I got off the next stop and just decided to walk. I arrived at my friend's house and we hung out for a while. I told her about Mr. Salmon, as I like to call him. We watched Green Day videos. Normal 12-13-year-old stuff. We both got off the money from our parents and buy some other random stuff like ice cream and makeup before we head out to the nearest Staples. The nearest Staples was in a Jewish neighborhood, and they certainly do not like outsiders. We were getting all sorts of looks in the store as we were the only non-Hazard 8 kids there. We were both wearing t-shirts and shorts, and they did not all seem pleased by that. We got our stuff, although it was grossly overcharged by the Hazard 8 cashier, who was giving us evil glares, and then decided to go to some kind of bakery since we were hungry. We walked into this bakery and asked for 2 muffins. Immediately they asked us if we were Jewish. I'm literally just 1/8th Jewish, but my friend was Jewish and was prepping for her bar mitzvah, so she said yes quietly, and I said no since I'm literally not. I'm blonde, blue-eyed, and gangly at the time. After about 10 minutes they handed her her muffin. We had to wait 45 minutes before they gave me my muffin, which immediately smelled kind of weird. Before I could bite into it, a hazard grown man sat down at our table and told us that unless we were Jewish we shouldn't be here, and when my friend said she was Jewish he told her how she was sinning by looking like that. He finally left, and I took a bite of my muffin only to find out that it had been filled with meat. We left shortly after that. Wow. Story 9. Some preface before this story. I work in a shoe store in a small town, a kind of town where everybody knows everybody. I'm 28, but apparently I look 19. Only 4 ladies work here, with myself included, the youngest being 17, then myself. The managers are late 40s, early 50s. This happened on 3 separate occasions within about a week and a half. Also, this guy was not at all looking around the store for shoes. That for sure is clear by the end. The first encounter was Tuesday around 3 o'clock. It's pouring rain outside and I'm the only one on the floor. This guy comes in, so I comment about the weather and see if he's on the search for anything. He replies with, "No, I'm just waiting to get into the car so I'll have a look around." Okay, great. So I'm checking some shoes and tidying up. I'm facing this guy because he's the only customer in the store and I'd rather not have anybody steal. So I glance up and this guy has his eyes locked down on me. I get a weird vibe and I think to myself, no, I'm not gonna do this. I got into the back and grabbed the assistant manager. I tell her this guy is giving me weird vibes and can you come out and be around me? She agrees and then asks him how he's doing, but the guy does not want to talk to her. Minimal response and no eye contact. He's in the store just about 40 minutes waiting. He eventually leaves when he realizes she's not going anywhere. The second encounter now was on a Friday around 5 p.m. I'm literally telling my co-worker, a 17-year-old, the story about the creepy guy. We are at the front of the store so we can greet everybody coming in. I see this guy walk by and go up the street, so I tell her that that's the guy. We carry on chatting and he's now headed back to his car. He steps off the sidewalk and off the curb. Stops dead in his tracks. Turns around and comes back to the store. He walks through the door and I do the usual pleasantries, but I'm not going out of my way for a conversation. So my manager is here at this point, so I let her know that he's the guy that I had a really weird vibe with. She keeps an eye on him. Goes and tries to have a conversation, but again he is not having it. He will not talk to anyone older than me, which is really weird in this town. So we just decide to ignore him and try on the new stock while he browses. He's in the back room and has positioned himself facing the mirror on the back wall. Nothing weird about that yet. So I glance back and he's literally locked his eyes on me in the mirror. Wherever one might go he watches. My manager takes notice and puts herself between him and I, so at this point we've all talked to him. He's only interested in me though. My manager tried to deter him and his creepy escapades. She says, "Oh, is your husband picking you up at 6? So I of course quickly respond with yes, but it doesn't affect the guy. She says, "Oh, there must be something going on in town. There's been about 3 cops driving by, but again there's nothing." No response from this man. So she says there's some stuff in the back room that I need you to do, and she walks me back and tells me what to do. 30 seconds after I'm in the back, this guy leaves so fast, but that's not until he's talked to the 17-year-old and says to her, there's some shoes that I need in the back I think would fit, but I want to be discreet about it. Keep an open mind that this man has never once even tried to attempt to try a shoe on. He literally stood stationary the entire time he was there, and the third encounter is Monday at 5:30. So it's myself and the assistant manager again. I'm working until close, which is 6 p.m. She's done at 5:30. So I'm alone for half an hour. We are headed back up to the front so I can start closing duties and she can clock out, and guess who walks into the store? Creepy guy. So he's back again and I'm visibly uncomfortable. He goes straight to the work boot section. The assistant manager refuses to leave now. She's not leaving me alone. Everyone in the store has had a bad vibe with this guy at the point. So even she's uncomfortable. She grabs her cell phone and calls up her son. He's the only readily available male we have. So we are parallel with the creeper at this point. She says, "Can you come to the store right now?" in a fairly quiet tone, but the guy heard it for sure. By the time we finish walking up to the tills, this guy frantically leaves. He says in a hurry, "Oh, I didn't see anything today," and he leaves. A couple of seconds after he leaves, her son comes up. He comes in and grabs the guy's plate number, but also videos this guy leaving to get the best plate. The creepy guy peeled out of the parking lot and he never returned again. Story 10. A few days ago, I'm walking downtown in the mid-afternoon when I become aware of a presence walking behind me. It's a busy city and a crowded street, so I don't think much of it. But this man stands right behind me for a few blocks. I can hear his breathing behind me becoming ragged and coarse. He's breathing heavily, and it gets heavier as he follows me. I don't want to turn around or make eye contact, but I can sense him following me. Then I hear him say it. "Honey, if you don't slow down, I'll never catch up to you." I get terrified. I feel my blood run cold and I whip around to confront him. He's big, at least a foot taller than me, and I can see on his chest one of those sticky paper ID tags. It's from a mental hospital. A mental patient has been following me for blocks and now was trying to get me to slow down. I turn away and immediately cross the street, not looking back, but he appeared to stop following me at that point. I'm just still terrified by the incident. That's how this story would be told if I were the woman, but I'm not. I'm the guy. And this is the story about how I accidentally became somebody else's let's not meet story. I have been out of the office for over a week due to a nasty bronchitis virus that utterly wiped me out, and my girlfriend, my poor loving girlfriend who nursed me back to health, has now been stuck at home sick, and this was my first day back at work. I feel bad for her. I decided to try and do something nice for her. She's an avid player of an Elder Scrolls Online UC, which just released a new expansion, and that expansion allowed for a new class, and she had put off getting the expansion in order to focus on picking up the slack for my illness, so I decide I'm gonna go get it for her. I decide on my lunch break to go to the nearest GameStop and get her the digital code, so on my lunch I head out. Now here's the thing, the local GameStop and my office are on opposite sides of a very large hill. Remember also, I've been sick all week with bronchitis. Now I get to the GameStop, buy the digital code, and text her a picture of it along with a message very jokingly told her that she needs to wait till I get home to play it because I'll never catch up otherwise. Then I start heading back to the office, and I start walking back up the hill, and this is where the heat and the humidity and the fact that I'm walking uphill after once again having bronchitis starts to take its toll. Then I begin to, I'm quite sure, very audibly breathe heavily. I also just so happened to be walking the exact same path of a woman who has ended up walking right in front of me, and I've now been walking behind for a couple of blocks. Two important things about me. First, I'm a tech nerd, so I have the smartwatch, the Bluetooth earbud, the whole 9 yards. Second, I'm a big guy and the 6'2", 240 pounds college athlete who still works out a lot and can probably beat you up sort of way. I'm a scary looking guy. I'm a gosh dang teddy bear who posts pictures of his cat on Reddit and wouldn't hurt a soul, but I'm fully aware that in the wrong context, let's say you're a 5-foot woman and you think I'm following you, could be freaking terrifying. So what's the tech nerd relevance here? Smartwatch. Bluetooth. My girlfriend calls me, and I tap on my watch to pick up the call without taking the phone out of my pocket, which syncs directly to my Bluetooth earbuds. My girlfriend hears that audible chime on her end, and knowing I've picked up launches into how she couldn't wait and is already playing without me, and that's when I quite jokingly, as I'm glad she's filling up to it, tell her, honey, if you don't slow down, I'll never catch up, and the woman ahead of me freaks out and whips around, and I immediately realize, oh my god, she thinks I'm talking to her because I'm not holding a phone, and I've been following her for the last 2 blocks audibly wheezing. And then I realized something else. Remember how I said that it was my first day back to work? I still was 100%, and I had left my work idea at home, and I work in a very secure government building, the kind of building that doesn't just let you into it even if all the security guards know your face because you've been there for 10 years. Now, no ID, you still got to go get a near cavity search level screen in and wait for your HR to verify that yes, you still work there, and no, you're not a disgruntled ex-employee looking to steal confidential files, but once you've had your morning colonoscopy, they do give you one of those odd visitor badges so you can come and go in the building throughout the day without having to have your pride and personal boundaries violated every time. And this little sticky badge that I still had stuck to my chest bears the name of the government agency which I work for. What agency is that? The Department of Mental Health, because I, despite looking like someone who may have some point in his life had a nickname like Moose, which has on occasion I think led some to initially get the impression that I might be a tad slow on the uptake. I'm legally the regional legal director and deputy Chief Counsel for the State Office and Health Human Services. Her eyes move to the badge. She stays motionless for a moment, then turns and quickly hustles down the side street. It was at that moment I say to my girlfriend, I think some lady just thought I was trying to kidnap her, so here's to you, downtown lady, who I'm pretty sure thought I was some heavy-breathing pervert mental patient instead of a government bureaucrat who was just trying to do something nice for his girlfriend on his lunch break, while vastly overestimating his own physical well-being. Let's not meet again because I'm afraid your heart won't take it. Also, I'm sorry. Story 11. This happened about a year ago. I was on Grindr looking for either fun dates or new relationships. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Grindr, it's a social media app that is designed primarily for gay men, and many people use it to hook up with other men. One day I was scrolling and I received a new message from a guy who we'll call Brian. I took a look at some of his profile pictures, read his bio, and decided that I was interested in him. We started messaging back and forth, and he seemed to be a really kind, charismatic guy who really knew how to hold up a conversation, something that is very hard to come by on the app. A few days went by and we eventually exchanged numbers. He seemed nice enough and I wanted to see if he was as great in person as he was over text message, so I asked him if he wanted to go on a date with me. He very happily agreed, so I scheduled a date with him. The plan was that I was going to drive to his place, pick him up, and we would grab some lattes at my favorite local coffee shop. It was around 6 p.m. and I sent him a text message to tell him that I was leaving my house, to which he responded with a quaint, "I can't wait to meet you." I smiled at his supposed kindness. Then in the middle of driving to his house I received a phone call from him, so I picked up, and the conversation went mostly as follows. I said, "Hey Brian, what's up?" Brian said, "Hey, quick change of plans. I'm feeling tired and I would rather not go out. Would you be okay with staying at my place? We can watch some shows and order some takeout." I said, "I mean, that's not really what I had in mind. I'd like to go out and do things on the first date." Brian said, "Oh, don't be such a buzzkill, just come over. I won't show you a bad time." As he spoke on the phone, I got a really strange feeling in my gut, like something was wrong about how he talked to me before I met him. I imagined his voice and inflections to sound a lot more light-hearted, because the way we texted was very whimsical and fun, but over the phone he talked as if he was in a hurry, perhaps slightly frantic. However, despite my gut feeling, I decided that I would accept his offer. Maybe he was just tired or stressed from the workday. I pulled into his driveway, and he greeted me at the door. It looked like his picture, and he was very handsome. He was wearing fashionable glasses, and his straight hair contrasted with his light skin. When we go inside, I was greeted by one of his roommates who was playing Dark Souls in the living room. I wanted to be polite, so I approached the roommate and introduced myself. I did want to come off his route to Brian in case this date ended up going really well. While I'm talking with his roommate, Brian calls my name and beckons me to walk inside his bedroom. I politely excused myself and followed Brian into his room. When I walked inside, I saw something straight out of a horror movie, only this was real. And right in front of me there were candles lit all around, and when I got a closer look I noticed that there were several altars scattered across the room. Ancient-looking figures, animal bones, jars with unidentifiable liquids inside, some sort of dagger next to a cat's skull, the whole shebang. I don't remember all the altars, but I do remember a couple. One of them was on the floor, and there was a glass container that held some kind of yellow liquid with animal skulls surrounding the container. Another altar was on a shelf next to his bed, and this one had a few candles surrounding some kind of doll with its eyes sewn shut and its hands missing. Now that one was creepy and bizarre. A part of me was telling me to nope the F out of there immediately, but I thought that maybe I was overreacting to someone's religious choices. I didn't know much about cult religions, so I didn't want to assume that this guy had any kind of male intent. Plus, I can be a little reactive at times, so I decided to stay and go along with the ride. When we walked into his room, I wanted to calm my nerves, and because I have a really curious mind, I decided to ask about what these altars were for. He told me that he would tell me about them later. A weird response, but again, I brushed it off my shoulders, thinking that he might just be a bit eccentric. I can be a little weird too, so I try to be empathetic and understanding. Then I point to one of the altars and ask about it. He frowns at me and scowls. "Don't touch that." His voice startled me. His intense inflections paired with his angry expression sent a lump straight to my throat, and I felt threatened. I was almost 4 feet away from the altar, not even close to touching it, and yet he just yelled at me like a father yelling at his kid to stop messing around at church. I was confused and thinking I had done something wrong. I apologized. In the blink of an eye, his scowl turned into a smile, and he kindly invited me to sit with him to watch a show. What really weirded me out was the fact that his smile looked and felt genuine. He had just gotten angry, but all of a sudden he didn't care and served me up a really kind disposition. I was unsure of how to process what had just happened, so I just decided to sit down with him. He seemed to be acting pretty normal once this ordeal had happened, and we started to talk about ourselves. After some time he became really sweet and soft-spoken, similar to how he was over the text messages, and we were able to share some stories about our lives. It was starting to feel like an actual first date, and my nerves subsided a little bit. I was probably just overthinking everything else. He then turns on his TV. Now mind you, I was still a little bit freaked out by his random outburst, so I was on guard. So I offered to invite his roommate to come and hang out with us. Brian's roommate seemed like an old average Joe when I met him, and I just wanted someone else to be there to act as a buffer. I wanted to see how he would act around other people, but when I gave him my idea, he immediately shut me down and his personality switched from easygoing to stressed and angry. He started cussing out his roommate to me, making it clear that he absolutely hated him. The switch was so jarring I started to panic again. Then he changed the subject and started to talk about me. He said that he found me really attractive, and in the process his fingers started to graze my thighs. I needed a second to collect myself though, so I excused myself to get some water. When I stood up, he immediately slapped my butt and told me not to take too long. I walked out and closed the door behind me and started to make my way for the kitchen. I was hoping to chat with his roommate on the way and see if I could ask him some more about Brian, but he was asleep on the living room couch, so I just made a beeline to the cabinets and searched for a cup. I thought about walking out and driving home because I didn't appreciate his sudden touchiness, but I started getting paranoid. He had all of those altars, and he didn't tell me what they were for. I've seen some horror films about the occult, and I truly had no idea what this guy was capable of. Yeah, he was sweet at times, but he was showing me some really aggressive behavior. Who's to say that this guy isn't able to put some kind of voodoo curse on me? Yeah, it's dramatic, I know, but you can never be too sure. So I grabbed my water and cautiously head back to his room. When I walked back inside, I saw him sitting on the couch with his legs crisscrossed and his eyes closed. When I approached him, I saw his mouth moving, but I didn't hear anything coming from it. I got weirded out by this, so I called his name, but he didn't respond. Strange. I called his name a second time and he opened his eyes, uncrossed his legs, and went back to watching the TV without at all addressing what he was doing. What was he doing? I was getting really worried, but I did what I could do to keep my cool. I didn't want to do anything to upset him or make him lose his cool. I sat next to him on the couch and we started talking once again. He was completely normal, unnervingly normal. It's like I was in the room with a real-life Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, except Brian was able to switch between them seamlessly. I needed to do something, but what was I supposed to do? I couldn't call him out because he might lash out at me in some malicious way, but I also didn't want to stay because he was freaking me out. But I stay anyways, and I try to devise some plan to get out of there without making him angry. At some point he gets up to grab his phone, and I thought that I would try dishing out some of the same medicine that he gave me, so I grabbed his, but maybe it would release the tension that I was feeling. Maybe he would like it and make him less aggressive. Regardless, I wanted to try something. Made my move and give him a cheeky but grab. Immediately he turned around and swatted my hand away and lunged at me. He had his hands curled up in a fist, and he flung it towards my face. His fist was inches away from making the connection with my right cheek, but he stopped mid-punch. In that moment I saw that his eyes were wide open and his facial expression was cold and emotionless. He was right in my face. My heart was beating so fast that it felt like I was seconds away from an aneurysm. He was looking directly at me, and my eyes stared back. At this moment I felt like the prey to his predator. Then he uncurled his fist, put his icy hands on both sides of my face, and started to squeeze. "You're just so cute." He pulled me in and forced a kiss. I absolutely did not want to kiss him, but I was paralyzed and couldn't will myself to push him away. His words are patronizing, sort of like he was talking to a dog, and it felt even more like this because he had just scrunched my face against his. I felt disgusting kissing someone who had almost just punched me in the face, but there was nothing I could do in that moment. Again, I didn't want to risk pissing him off. He slowly pulled away, gave me another sweet smile, and sat down pretending that nothing had just happened. Just started staring at the TV. I told myself I'm over this completely. His behavior was becoming more erratic and more unpredictable. His room was creepy. He clearly had associations with the occult, and frankly, he was scaring me. I eventually decided that I'd rather deal with the voodoo-looking altars later on than stay at his house and have to put up with the immediate danger, so I snapped myself out of the anxiety-induced trance. I stood up and told him that I was starting to get sick and that I wanted to go home. He got angry and tried to convince me to stay the night, But I gathered my courage and insisted that it was time for me to leave. He begrudgingly let me, but it was clear that my decision upset him. I didn't care anymore. I said my goodbyes and told him that I would text him later. I got in my car and drove home, shaking and sweating. I felt relieved to get out of there, but nervous that he might try to do something. The uncertainty of it all is what truly shakes me up, but thankfully no actual harm came to me. Who knows what would have happened if I stayed, though I blocked Brian's number as well as his Grindr profile, and even now I keep my bone Grindr pictures private. I haven't heard from him since, but I still fear that he's going to try and come after me somehow someday. But I stay anyways, and I try to devise some plan to get out of there without making him angry. At some point he gets up to grab his phone, and I thought that I would try dishing out some of the same medicine that he gave me, so I grab his, but maybe it would release the tension that I was feeling. Maybe he would like it and make him less aggressive. Regardless, I wanted to try something, made my move and give him a cheeky but grab. Immediately he turned around and swatted my hand away and lunged at me. He had his hands curled up in a fist, and he flung it towards my face. His fist was inches away from making the connection with my right cheek, but he stopped mid-punch. In that moment I saw that his eyes were wide open and his facial expression was cold and emotionless. He was right in my face. My heart was beating so fast that it felt like I was seconds away from an aneurysm. He was looking directly at me, and my eyes stared back. At this moment I felt like the prey to his predator. Then he uncurled his fist, put his icy hands on both sides of my face, and started to squeeze. "You're just so cute." He pulled me in and forced a kiss. I absolutely did not want to kiss him, but I was paralyzed and couldn't will myself to push him away. His words are patronizing, sort of like he was talking to a dog, and it felt even more like this because he had just scrunched my face against his. I felt disgusting kissing someone who had almost just punched me in the face, but there was nothing I could do in that moment. Again, I didn't want to risk pissing him off. He slowly pulled away, gave me another sweet smile, and sat down pretending that nothing had just happened. Just started staring at the TV. I told myself I'm over this completely. His behavior was becoming more erratic and more unpredictable. His room was creepy. He clearly had associations with the occult, and frankly, he was scaring me. I eventually decided that I'd rather deal with the voodoo-looking altars later on than stay at his house and have to put up with the immediate danger. So I snapped myself out of the anxiety-induced trance. I stood up and told him that I was starting to get sick and that I wanted to go home. He got angry and tried to convince me to stay the night. But I gathered my courage and insisted that it was time for me to leave. He begrudgingly let me, but it was clear that my decision upset him. I didn't care anymore. I said my goodbyes and told him that I would text him later. I got in my car and drove home, shaking and sweating. I felt relieved to get out of there, but nervous that he might try to do something. The uncertainty of it all is what truly shakes me up, but thankfully no actual harm came to me. Who knows what would have happened if I stayed, though I blocked Brian's number as well as his Grindr profile, and even now I keep my bone Grindr pictures private. I haven't heard from him since, but I still fear that he's going to try and come after me somehow someday. Story 13. This happened last year in autumn, and I hope it never happens again. I moved to this country at the beginning of the year, and already I quit a crappy workplace job by June. After being unemployed and basically a housewife for a few months, I finally found a job which didn't require me to speak the country's native language. By the time that this incident happened, I was in the middle of training and quite happy with everything. One thing I never liked here were the people. Well, not all the people, but some. There are way more street beggars and shady faces around here than I was used to back at home. Just like every morning I headed to the bus station. On my way there I saw a guy staying somewhere near a small building which was selling the tickets. He looked a little disoriented. He had a winter hat and long pants and sweaters on despite it being very hot outside, and from the look of his overall appearance I could tell straight away that he is nowhere to return home to. I passed by him and all was good until I heard someone shouting behind me. I didn't look back directly, just looked to the sides, but it was enough for me to realize that this guy was shouting at people, and probably he yelled at me as well. I also saw that a bus was coming, so I picked up a fast pace to catch it, then started praying to whoever heard me that this guy does not get on the same bus as me. As always, I sat on the window side to ensure that there is a free space next to me that people can occupy if needed. I'm trying to be considerate of others, so I always leave the space closer to the passage free when I sit down on a bus, but this one time my consideration backfired. I sat down, a nice lady sat next to me, and the doors were about to close, but guess what? The guy from before appeared, pushed the lady at the door more aside, and jumped into the bus. Doors closed, the vehicle started, and I made sure to continue praying that he would go to the front of the bus, but he didn't. All good. I thought, I have this very nice looking lady sitting next to me. She will act as a human shield. For the first few minutes, the guy was walking around in the middle of the bus talking to people uncomfortably closely. People, of course, turned away. Some even relocated to the front of the bus. When the guy was approaching them somewhere close to the first station was the moment when this guy turned towards us and started doing the same to this lady next to me. When the doors opened, the lady stood up and quickly got off. I should have followed her instantly, but for some reason I didn't, and that's where I messed up. The guy sat right down there, right where the lady had fled from, almost in an instant. If I had reacted quickly enough, I could have gotten off as well, but I didn't, so there I was stuck right next to this guy who clearly has something going on in his mind. Luckily, or not, I had noise-canceling headphones on, so I felt somewhat protected. Maybe he somehow knows that through over-the-ear headsets I wouldn't hear him, and he will let me be. I'm not sure if he actually knew, or he just didn't plan on paying any attention to me. Either way, I was kind of relieved that he didn't come into my face trying to speak to me. He was mainly shouting at other people who just got on. Sometimes he said something about tickets, from what I could discern, maybe telling people to use their tickets. He himself didn't have one though, and when he was silent, he moved back and forth on the chair while biting his thumb like he had hyperactivity issues. As I wasn't on his target list, the only thing I had to deal with from that moment on was the smell. He had a very strong urine odor surrounding him, like he was doing his thing directly into his pants. Never once washed them in 10 years. I leaned as close to the window as I could and kept looking outside as the bus was approaching the station where I had to get off. I felt this frustration was building up in me. How will I get off? I can't even speak the language of the country, let alone ask someone like him to please allow me the space to exit the vehicle at every station. I hoped he would get off, but he didn't seem to be wanting to. I also hoped that someone from the crowd would take action to get him off, but no one did. And of course, the checkers come only that one day when you don't have a ticket, but when you actually need to be saved, they're nowhere to be found. My only luck was that he took interest in somebody else from that crowd and stood up. He then started singing something that sounded like the communist anthem and tried to get the crowd to sing along with him. He made the hand movements and eye contact with lots of people, but then he finally got out of where we were and started moving towards the bus. That was my chance, and I took it. I never pushed myself through crowds as fast as I did back then. As soon as the doors opened, I boosted out of the bus and didn't even look back. I almost ran straight into work, though I wasn't involved in grave danger. I was traumatized enough to fear bus rides to this day and keep a lookout for strange people. I don't wait for saviors anymore. I get off if I have to, and absolutely do not sit down when people like this are nearby. Lesson learned. I'm not sure if he actually knew, or he just didn't plan on paying any attention to me. Either way, I was kind of relieved that he didn't come into my face trying to speak to me. He was mainly shouting at other people who just got on. Sometimes he said something about tickets, from what I could discern, maybe telling people to use their tickets. He himself didn't have one though, and when he was silent, he moved back and forth on the chair while biting his thumb like he had hyperactivity issues. As I wasn't on his target list. The only thing I had to deal with from that moment on was the smell. He had a very strong urine odor surrounding him, like he was doing his thing directly into his pants. Never once washed them in 10 years. I leaned as close to the window as I could and kept looking outside as the bus was approaching the station where I had to get off. I felt this frustration was building up in me. How will I get off? I can't even speak the language of the country, let alone ask someone like him to please allow me the space to exit the vehicle at every station. I hoped he would get off, but he didn't seem to be wanting to. I also hoped that someone from the crowd would take action to get him off, but no one did. And of course the checkers come only that one day when you don't have a ticket, but when you actually need to be saved, they're nowhere to be found. My only luck was that he took interest in somebody else from that crowd and stood up. He then started singing something that sounded like the communist anthem and tried to get the crowd to sing along with him. He made the hand movements and eye contact with lots of people, but then he finally got out of where we were and started moving towards the bus. That was my chance, and I took it. I never pushed myself through crowds as fast as I did back then. As soon as the doors opened, I boosted out of the bus and didn't even look back. I almost ran straight into work, though I wasn't involved in grave danger. I was traumatized enough to fear bus rides to this day and keep a lookout for strange people. I don't wait for saviors anymore. I get off if I have to, and absolutely do not sit down when people like this are nearby. Lesson learned. Story 15. The events described in this story happened 9 years ago in Russia and Siberia. It was 2011. I was 17 and I was a typical high school student. During the last year of school, studied hard and mostly cared about the finals, but also secretly longed for some overwhelming romantic love in my life. My high school was affiliated with the university, so every autumn we had students who came to do their teaching internship or practice, how we called it. It usually lasted for 2 to 3 months depending on the subject that they taught, and usually these were female interns who came in. As in Russia, the majority of teachers are women, but that's another topic. But this year it was an exception. A new intern who was an extremely good-looking guy who was around 24 to 25 and who taught math had this geeky charm. Even though he didn't teach in my class, at least half of the girls there had a crush on him, and it is not an exaggeration to say that a fair share of the school got crazy. I was no exception. Course, so every time I saw him in the corridors, I smiled and tried to catch his attention, because in my head he looked like a perfect Prince Charming, and with every day I was more and more into him. I thought he also liked me, but you can never be sure until something happens, and something happened. He found me through the social media and wrote me a message from an empty profile saying that he has been watching me, that I'm beautiful, and that he wanted to get to know me. Sounds romantic, right? I couldn't believe my eyes when I got the message. It was a dream come true. He asked me a whole bunch of different questions, ranging from my favorite movie to where I lived, and it turned out that we lived close by. On the first evening we chatted all night, and he even suggested doing a romantic thing as to turn the light on and off in the window so that we could see each other. He was finishing his practice in our school at the time, so he called me out for a date. After it, I agreed, but decided to slow down and to communicate only on social media, as I was really shy in real life and I needed time to adapt. That was when it started to get creepy. First, he started to tell me that I was meant for him and that there's no way around it, and he felt it from the first time he saw me. But judging from my answers to his questions, he understood that I do not behave correctly and I need guidance. I want a career and I want to study in Moscow, while a woman should care for her man and her own family, so I should stay in my hometown with him. His logic was that he was my fate, and us meeting was also fate, so what else to look for in this world? So he offered me his educational services through some religious stories he sent me and through abstracts from the Bible that I started to receive daily. From the second day since we met, that has started to get on my nerves, and I didn't like him as much anymore. But only after the next creepy thing did I become really concerned. In 3 or 4 days since we met, he came to my house and asked the concierge the number of my flat, since after the first evening he knew that I lived on the top floor and tried to get into. Luckily she did not let him in. He wrote a message to me that he wanted to do a surprise for me and maybe meet my parents. This was when I understood that this is not romantic and it's actually abnormal, and I told him that I need a break from our communication, and I deleted him from social media. He didn't want to take a break, and he started to follow me on my way home from school, as he said, to talk and to clarify that he only wanted good for me, which was exceptionally creepy. And while the first day he followed me to the bus stop, later tried to follow me up into my house. All that seemed to infuriate him, not calm him down. Somewhere he got my phone number, and during the last days of school I received messages like, "I'm in the school building running, hide. I imagine you also scared, hiding in the girls' bathroom while I'm still here." Then the peak of the story was when I came back home from school and I had 3 or 4 days break from his attempt to talk to me, and the concierge told me that the guy came in and left a box for me. I did not know what to do with it, so I brought it home. Yeah, I know that was stupid of me. Like I said, I was 26, and he wrote me an SMS that if I opened the box he will leave me alone. I decided to throw it away, since I sneaked inside the box and saw that there were some chocolates and a treat for my dog. But at this point I did not exclude the fact that it could be unsafe. After that I finally told my mom about all this mess that was happening, because before that she was aware only of the romantic side of the story. She decided to interfere immediately once she got all the details, so she took his phone number and called him. She told him that if he doesn't leave me alone she will tell the school administration about his actions, and he will have problems at the university with both the practice and his ethical principles in general. I would love to say that he disappeared forever after but he didn't. This all was happening in March, and then he graduated in June and started writing and tried to stalk me again, judging from the reports of my grandmother. But this time he could not. I got accepted to Moscow State University and moved there soon. Once I moved away, I never saw him again. Story 16. This happened back when I used to be on Grindr, but it always reminds me of how glad I am that I'm no longer doing the online dating thing. There's quite a bit of backstory here before the creepy, so if you aren't interested in that, feel free to skip ahead. For those unfamiliar with Grindr, it's a gay dating app that shows guys nearby. It makes you use your location while using the app, but it doesn't give your exact location unless you send it to the person directly. Anyways, I got a message from a blank profile one time. No name, no picture, no bio. The only thing that popped up was how close he was, less than a mile. This happens a lot because there are a lot of closeted guys out there, especially back then. Being an overweight guy in the gay community, I had to take anything I could get because most gay guys in my community wouldn't even give me the time of day. He started off nice enough, introduced himself as Jesus, and asked me how I was doing and all that sort of small talk. He told me he was into chubbier guys, and after exchanging pictures we both agreed that we found the other one very attractive. He asked me if I'd like to come over to play video games and maybe have some fun. I'd only met a couple of guys off of Grindr, and although we had some good times, it ultimately didn't pan out. However, I had met them somewhere public first, so I'd never met anyone at their place or ever had anybody come over to mine. I figured it had been long enough and some casual fun might be nice. Plus he was really cute and actually my type. He agrees to come pick me up since I'm only a few blocks away. Apparently he lived in the nearby trailer park. I decided I'd like to shower first, and he says he'll head over. Then he says he's really embarrassed to ask, but wonders if I'd be willing to lend him $20. Supposedly he lives with his mom and she had left for the weekend without any food money for him. I know it was really stupid in hindsight, but I felt really bad for him. I tell him I don't have any cash, but he says that's fine, I can just send him some money through an app. I don't remember what it was called, but it was something like Venmo. I go ahead and send it, take my shower, and then let him know I'm ready. He says he's heading out but can't find his keys. I say that's okay, I'll just wait for him outside. I hadn't given him my address yet, but I was almost ready to. However, when I asked if he had found them, he never responded. Minutes went by, then an hour. I messaged him again to ask if he was still coming, and I could see him going on and offline, so I know he was reading my messages. I finally just accepted that he was ghosting me and probably just wanted money. I messaged him one last time and told him that it was pretty messed up, and explained that if he had just asked, I probably would have given him the money without having to go through all that. What can I say? I can be somewhat a softie. Fast forward a couple of weeks, I never hear anything back from him, so I just blocked him. I get another message from someone on my Grindr relatively close to me. His profile is also blank, which raises my suspicions. He tells me he's also into chubby guys, which really makes me suspicious because it's highly unlikely two chubby chasers live so close to me. We trade pictures again, and it's a different guy. However, he suddenly asks for money in Grindr. You can create as many accounts as you'd like. All you really need is an email address. There was tons of spam accounts on that were automated. It was a real pain in the butt. Anyways, I called him out because I was pretty sure it was Jesus. At first he acts like he does and know what I'm talking about. He calls me crazy and then blocks me. I felt a little bit bad because I thought maybe I had made a mistake and just chased off a guy for nothing. Then again, his sudden offensive reaction made me have doubts. Weeks go by and every so often the same guy tries to fool me, even though I don't fall for it. Eventually I blow up on him and asked him what his problem was. We start going at it, and eventually he says, "You won't say this to my face." I tell him that I would gladly tell him to F off in person, not that I expected him to actually show up this time. He responds with, "All right, we'll see about that, be there soon." Now, I was a little bit worried at this point because it crossed my mind that he may not actually be gay, and he might be some sort of homophobe looking to bash some gay guys. My mind always goes back to those men who have been murdered after meeting up with someone on Grindr. However, I realized I never gave him my address, so I say, "Nice try, but I never gave you my address." "Yes, you did, stupid. You just don't know it was me. Be ready, I'm on my way." At this point, my anxiety starts setting off because I did give my address to the guy who had to cancel last minute, but I didn't think anything of it because it was before Jesus had messaged me a second time. I tried to think about what to do, so I decided to try and document his threats. I say, "I know I didn't give you my address. Besides, what do you want with me anyways?" He says, "You'll see, I've got something for you now. The trailer park is always having police go by there, and my neighborhood is separated from theirs by a bayou. At night I always heard gunshots out there, so I began to panic. What if he had a gun? What if he brought friends with him?" I say, "Oh yeah, and what's that?" He says, "Something that'll shut you up." I'm outside. I started freaking out because I couldn't tell if he was just trying to mess with me or if he actually was outside. I've been screenshotting everything and sent it to the Grindr administration to report him for credible threats of violence. I wasn't sure if I should call the cops or not because if he was lying, I didn't want to look stupid. Plus, I wasn't sure if it was even enough for them to do anything. I decided to peek out from the upstairs window and see if I could spot him. If I could get the make and model of his car, maybe I could at least have something to give the cops. I live in the middle of a cul-de-sac, so when I look out the window I can see all the way to the end of my street. When I looked out, I saw a car that I've never seen before parked on the side of the road. At the end, my heart was pounding because I just knew it was him, but a part of me was hoping that it wasn't. I decided I would just test him and see if he was really out there. He says, "I'm waiting." I say, "I'm outside already." "Where are you?" Of course I wasn't, but if that was him and he did know my address, then why wouldn't he just park outside my house? Sure enough, I was right. He says, "Yeah, I see you. You're gonna get it now." I say, "Then come give it to me. I'm right here." He says, "Just you wait." I knew he couldn't see me from his car because I was peeking out discreetly out of our windows, and our windows have a privacy shade on them where people can only see a black screen from the Outside, a few more minutes go by and the car takes off. I have a feeling that he was using Grindr to triangulate the area of where my neighborhood was, but of course he couldn't find my exact house because it hadn't been him who had given my address to Grindr. Later sent me a message saying he'd been banned from the app and they would contact the local authorities. I never heard anything else after that, so I don't know what became of it. The cops never contacted me if they did pay him a visit, and I never heard from him again. Story 17. This story has genuinely chilled me to the core. I work as a lifeguard at a summer camp. I hear things I shouldn't because people assume that I'm not paying attention, which is how I stumbled into this mess last summer. One camper named Mary got onto the radar of every person working there. It started when I was guarding the pool. A few counselors were chatting near me about how this older girl was stalking a guy that she had a crush on. At first I dismissed it until one counselor started saying in a lower tone that the girl was sent to our boss because she started saying some freaky stuff. Mary was never somebody you'd see and say, "Let me distance myself from her." At first glance, always surrounded by people laughing, smiling, telling jokes loud enough for the lifeguards to hear. That type of person. She never gave off any weird vibes whatsoever, but I couldn't really tell because I've only seen her a few times that summer. Yet I can tell you she has a 1,000-yard stare that definitely creates a sense of uneasiness. She just looks at you and you feel like she's looking right through you. But then again, Mary is so charismatic that you overlook it as just something she does. Hearing that Mary pulled something like this was alarming, to say the least. Apparently she was telling people that she would die for this boy and that anybody who got in her way would pay. Things like that. She had to go talk to the director because it scared a few people, but apparently said it was all inside jokes between her and some friends. The counselor seemed very unsure and I was uneasy after hearing that. For the rest of the summer I heard a lot of counselors saying that she was saying more and more worrying things that kept being brushed off as more inside jokes. Our boss sent out a memo to everybody saying that we needed to ignore what she was saying and further discussion would be grounds for getting fired. Mary heard the staff was uneasy and her mother complained. I forgot about her once the summer ended and assumed she wouldn't be invited back to camp, or rather she wouldn't return on her own accord because of all of these complaints. But I was more than alarmed to see her back again this summer, smiling and laughing with her friends. Now this leads us to the incidents that made me tell this story. The first incident happened when Mary was swimming with a few other people, her posse mostly. They were all playing in the 4 feet when somebody jumped onto her. She got really mad and suddenly started yelling at the girl and then raised her fist. I blew my whistle and told her that if she's out of the pool. I never felt such a chill run down my spine until she turned and gave me the nastiest look imaginable. Then Mary started talking. She's a dumb girl. I hate this girl. She's ruining my fun. She has no power. The second incident came when I was walking to the lunchroom 2 days later. She was standing near the door and once she saw me began to start saying things like the previous incident. But the one that really got my hair sticking up, really made me nervous, was when she said she has no idea what I'm capable of. It was harmless to hear but so chilling coming from her. The final incident happened a few days ago back at the pool. I was talking with a few of my co-workers. I joked about her statements to some co-workers, but then one of them told me she was coming right towards us. I turned around and she looked right at me. I could barely see her since I wasn't wearing my glasses, but I just knew it was eye contact. She walked up to me and without warning jabbed her finger into my chest. Mary immediately began telling me that I was essentially a waste of space. I could be gone if she lifted a finger. The final straw came when she told me in the most hauntingly short tone that she wanted my head because of all the problems that I've caused her. Remember, all I did was ask her not to punch her friend or she'd be kicked out of the pool. One of my co-workers happens to be a former quarterback, and got between us. He told her that she was extremely out of line with those statements, and that our boss would hear of this. Mary only laughed and said we could try getting her kicked out of camp, but then she looked at me and in short told me I was going to be sorry. I ended up going right to the supervisor after, and with all of my co-workers who witnessed it vouching for me, he went straight to my boss. I was never actually spoken to, but I stopped seeing Mary around camp after that. Her mother found me, however, and apologized on behalf of Mary. I later found out that when I asked her not to punch her friend, the guy she was stalking from last summer saw this incident embarrassed her enough that it finally opened his eyes, leading to him telling her to never speak to him again. Story 18. Although this happened in 2015, I'm posting this story now because it has been really heavy on my heart today and is genuinely making me feel sick. Judging from the sociopaths that I've heard in several stories, I think this is where she belongs. In September 2015, I moved to Colorado and was trained for my new job by a really great guy that we'll call Anthony. We became fast friends, but only that as I was seeing a guy that I met on Tinder, and he had a girlfriend that we'll call Katie, my roommate, and I invited Anthony over non-stop and sometimes saw Katie. She struck us as unnervingly happy and attention-seeking. By October, Anthony and Katie had a civil breakup after only dating a month. They had been friends for over 7 years previously, and Anthony felt that suited him better than their relationship. In November, Anthony and I realized our feelings for each other, but we were apprehensive about going public with it so as to not hurt Katie and not to alarm Anthony's extremely religious family. Anthony's dad is a pastor. It is also important to tell you that Katie has been living with Anthony's sister Anna and her husband and 3 very young daughters. Katie and Anna are best friends, and Katie is extremely close to Anthony's family. Not 2 weeks into our relationship, Anthony receives devastating news twice in one day. His father has prostate cancer and Katie is pregnant with his baby. I still vividly remember Anthony coming over and collapsing in my mom's, crying in shame and hurt. He told me that day that he would completely understand if I wanted to tap out of our relationship. I told him that day that I would stand by his side and we would endure this craziness together. By December, Katie has pitted Anthony's entire family against him, framing him as an unsupportive, flaky father-to-be that cared for neither her nor their baby's well-being. She posted videos of Anthony's 6-year-old niece singing to her baby belly and had late night sobbing fits with his sister over his lack of support. Anthony continues to earnestly support her over daily phone calls, text messages, financial support for medical bills, and even agrees to go to counseling. Anthony and I continue to have a healthy, happy relationship, and I come to see how broken he is in his attempts to please this raging ex-girlfriend. Anthony remains a steadfast father-to-be, begging to go to parental appointments with her and driving 45 minutes after working 12-hour shifts to support her. But every time he shows up, he receives "Sorry, they got me in early and I'm already done with the appointment" texts from Katie. Katie manipulates everyone again and again, going so far as to plan the gender reveal party on my birthday, a random Wednesday near Christmas, so that Anthony and his family won't be celebrating me but her and their child. I nearly lost my mind and hurt that Christmas with my family and friends, questioning why I would stick around for this man that would soon be a father to somebody else's kid. But I stuck by Anthony, knowing that he was a 27-year-old man of integrity, and that our love could overcome how incredibly difficult this was. Following the holidays, Anthony was encouraged by his father to stand in front of the congregation, confessing his premarital sex sin and asking support for forgiveness from the church. My shoulders shook with sobs as everyone stared at me, judging and maybe even pitying the girl dating the future baby daddy. I continued to have minimal interactions with his family who probably saw me as the reason that Anthony wasn't fully supporting his baby mama. On January 22, Anthony received a Facebook message from a man who claimed to work with Katie. He stated that Katie was mentally unstable and is not pregnant. She laughed when she bought her ultrasound on fakepregnancy.com. We couldn't believe this news, but we were absolutely floored when her ultrasound was an exact replica of the one sold on that website. Anthony sent the proof and the story to his parents and sisters and begged for them to see reason. They planned an intervention of sorts where they cornered her and presented the evidence. The stunning finale to this whole deal was that Katie didn't even cry. She apathetically admitted that the ultrasound at pregnancy was fake. She was flown out of her parents' house where we hoped they would get her the help she needed. However, in no time she was back in Colorado with a new job, yet another social work job with a Christian adoption agency. We were nauseated that such an unwell sociopath could be allowed to work with vulnerable children, but were unable to find a platform to report her to a social work governing body. What would have happened if she had been allowed to carry this pregnancy out longer? A fake pregnancy belly, something drastic. 2 months later, a news story revealed that a nearby Colorado woman cut a fetus out of a pregnant woman because she needed an infant after faking a pregnancy. It wasn't Katie, but all I could think was, what would she have done if her fake pregnancy escalated to 9 months? I still wonder if I should have had a restraining order put against her. Years later, I still feel alarmed that Katie lives a normal life and faced zero repercussions for the harm she inflicted on our family. Obviously, so many details were left out, and there aren't words for the lasting damage she wreaked on Anthony's relationships with his family members. When she posted on social media that she had a new boyfriend, it took all of my self-control to not message him saying, please be careful. She faked a pregnancy for 3 months without batting an eye. Katie had a master's in social work and was employed at a governmental agency. She was intelligent, scheming, and calculated. She purposely lied to and manipulated not only Anthony but her best friend Anna and her innocent 6, 9, and 10-year-olds. Katie, we still hurt from your insidious lie, and stay out of our lives forever. Story 19. I haven't thought about this story in a while, but when I remembered, I knew I had to tell you a little bit of background info. I'm a pretty short guy, around 5'4". I was out with 3 other people and my friend's mom. One friend that I'll call Cass for this story is 4'10" and very, very small. Sarah is about the same height as me, and the other friend, James, is a regular 5'8" guy. This is kind of important. My friends and I are really into knives and cool swords, so we found a store that sells pocket knives, flail maces, etc. We were there because Cass turned 18 and wanted to get a pocket knife by herself for the first time. What happened in the store was really important. She ended up getting 2 knives, and that was that. We were pretty hungry after, since it was close to dinner time, so we decided to hit up the McDonald's right next door. Now this knife shop is in, well, not that great of a neighborhood. Everyone around that area are people you should usually look out for on a nightly walk around town. We get into the McDonald's to order some food. James and Cass's mom stay in the car while Cass, Sarah, and I head in to order some food. We're standing in line chatting about ketchup for some reason, and this guy, a massive man, probably around 6'3", easily 250 pounds, walks over and starts talking to us, basically barging into our conversation. I'm a pretty paranoid person, so my alarm bells were already going off. I already knew this neighborhood was kind of sketchy, and this guy sent off so many red flags for me. He stood extremely close to us and just pretended like he knew us. I can't remember the full conversation, but I ended up ordering and getting my food early and sitting down, and Cass was next as the line moved up for Cass to order. This guy stood in line with her and walked with her to the register like he was her parent or something. Remember, she's a very small 18-year-old. My alarm bells were ringing off the hook, and I carried my pocket knife on me in case of crazy people like this. I turn around to kind of securely pull my knife out of my jean pocket into the pocket of my sweater. I turn around once it's in there, and this guy was turned back to the counter staring straight at me as I pulled it out. I think he somehow noticed I pulled it out but didn't say anything about it. I was pretty discreet about doing it, but my back was to him and I don't know how long he was staring at me. I honestly think that the action of me taking my knife out may have scared him off from doing something, taking my friend or something. He could have easily grabbed Cass and ran away. I think it may have made him back down a little, which was a relief. Cass got her food and sat down, but we waited for Sarah's food, which unfortunately took about 10 to 20 extra minutes to come out. I don't even remember if the guy ordered anything. He may have gotten a coffee or something. Then he went around and sat directly behind us and stared at us the entire time. We tried to text James to come inside with us, as he's the most intimidating out of all of us, but he wasn't answering the phone. We ended up calling Cass's mom to force James to come inside. I'm pretty sure he overheard us because he started to leave. As he left, he started talking to another group of teens, about 3 looking like upperclassmen in high school. He leaves and James walks in. We explained the situation and he seemed slightly unamused, but it was fine as long as we had an extra set of hands. We leave the McDonald's and the guy is nowhere to be found. Less than 5 minutes after he left, we get into the car and tell her mom to lock the doors and to leave because we're pretty scared. But that's not the end though, as we left a huge white van with no windows in the back and relatively tinted windows in the front was sitting close by, and we told her to hightail it out of there. And as we left, another guy was standing on the sidewalk having an argument with the air. Needless to say, we don't go back there without our knives because we never know what kind of crazy people that we will run into. Story 20. Pre-warning, this will be kind of a short story because I had to leave some details out to ensure that it's left anonymous. When I was around 15, I had started babysitting a family with 3 kids, 2 boys and 1 girl. Their mom knew me as the oldest was friends with my little brother and had asked my mom if I could help her out just because she had started taking on more shifts and her husband was doing the same. They lived right next to my high school and paid well, so I agreed. Despite not having that much experience, pretty quickly I realized that it was going to be difficult. The kids were great, but I was nervous around them. The oldest was fine, just played on his Xbox most of the time or did homework, but the 2 youngest were a different story. The middle child, daughter, was completely obsessed with horror movies, and on more than one occasion I had to hide the knives from her since she wanted to reenact them. And the youngest son tried to set fire to the Christmas tree. I know what kids can be like since I have a lot of younger and older cousins, but these ones drove me insane and I would constantly worry about them hurting themselves or each other if they played up. I would threaten to call their mom, which normally would work. It was after a few months that I realized if I had mentioned the dad, that's when they would just start to behave and do what I had asked. So that's what I started doing. Now, I never really met the dad. I just knew that the guy was really tall and had a big build, but was always described to me as still being really nice, so I never thought about it. On this occasion, I said to the youngest boy that I would call his dad if he didn't stop behaving, which resulted in a huge tantrum, so I ended up calling him and explaining. Lucky for me, the dad was getting off of work early, so he said that he would get home as quick as he could and apologized for the kid's behavior. When I had explained this, the kid was sobbing and ended up locking himself into his room. That day the dad got home and they weren't joking when they said he was tall. I'm only 5'3" and I'm 15 at the time. When I saw him having to crouch a little to get through the door because of his size, I remember thinking, oh my God, no wonder the kids won't misbehave when he's there. I said hi and apologized for calling him at work, which he just brushed off and said that it needed to be done and not to worry. We were both sitting on the couch. I can't really remember why, but I think we were talking about what days they needed me for. Now at this stage, the youngest 2 had went outside to play while I was with the oldest. As I had just been tidying a little bit from dinner, I was pretty weirded out because his oldest started to get pretty antsy when asked to go to the shop, kept making excuses to his dad, so I just offered to go. I could see the dad visibly frustrated and just wanted to defuse the situation. Now I would like to point out that everything seemed normal at this point, but I remember feeling very intimidated by the dad. I had only met him this one time and spoke for no more than 20 minutes. It turns out that the oldest has said to his mom that he didn't want me left alone with his dad, as he had apparently been watching me a little too closely during our short encounter. The parents had asked me to babysit later on in that week, which I had agreed to. However, in the space of a few days, that quickly changed. I got a text from mom apologizing for the last-minute arrangements, but saying I couldn't babysit. I was a little agitated since I had changed plans, but wasn't too bothered, and just said it was fine and just let me know if she needs me. She had asked me to come around to get my pay for the last 2 weeks, and I decided to just nip around before going home. As soon as I was in the house, I could tell that something was off. But not wanting to pry, I just went in to say hi, talked about books for a little bit, and then I left. It wasn't until the next week, I think, or maybe the week after, when everything kicked off. I came home to my mom being upset and angry, pacing the living room while my stepdad was trying to calm her down. I immediately went to asking her what was wrong. Feeling a little bit worried, instantly she just threw her arms around me and started crying and holding me. I had meant to be, but again got cancelled on. So I was home earlier than what I said originally. Pulling away confused, I asked her what was wrong again. Turns out my mom had been trying to get a hold of me, but my phone had died. I had went to babysit and nobody was home, so I just decided to head back on the bus, but wasn't able to let my mom know. She sits me down and starts trying to ask me questions about the dad and my time babysitting. Confused, I had mentioned that I only met him once and only really spoke to him on the phone a handful of times when the kids were acting up. Nodding, my mom starts pressing on and asking if anything else had happened, and kept questioning me, saying I could tell her anything. I just looked at her confused and told her that nothing had happened and asked what this was all about. I always remember her taking a deep breath and saying, "Oh, thank God," before letting me know what happened. Now, as I said, the details are vague because this was on the news. Turns out the guy had killed somebody while working and been taken in by the police during interrogation. It turns out that he admitted to beating his wife, and there were speculations of assault. There was also mentioned that one of his types were petite girls that had dark hair, which happened to match my description at the time, and my mom was terrified in case something happened. I'm turning 23 this year, and it still scares me when I think about it. I remember feeling like I was gonna throw up and had a sinking feeling in my stomach. My mom held me close, crying. She had worried sick all day and scared in case something had happened. Needless to say, I stopped babysitting for the family right then and there. I had felt so awful for the wife, as she was honestly one of the nicest women I've ever met. About a week later, I get a text from her. As it turns out, I had left some books, so I had said I would go get them after the phone call. When I saw her, my heart sank. She obviously had not slept and was putting on a brave face for the kids who weren't sure what was going on. We ended up sitting in the kitchen, and I gave her the biggest hug, just trying to comfort her. I had mentioned that if she needed help with the kids since he was gone, I would try and help, but she immediately refuses. As it turned out, people had started attacking the house. She gave me my stuff and paid the wages with a little bit more money, I would add, and said she appreciated it, but it would be better off if I just took a step back from the family, as she didn't want me getting hurt for being associated with them. To this day, I still remember them. I still think about them, and it still scares me. After thinking about what could have happened, I still talk to the younger kids who are a lot older now, and even help tutor the younger girl. I helped the oldest when he was starting high school because I noticed the kids bullying him for what his dad had done, which was awful considering it was the fault of the family. Overall, I feel bad for the children and the wife, but I'm so glad the dad isn't there anymore to lay his hands on them. Story 21. When I was 15, Ray William Johnson was the most subscribed to channel on YouTube. I feel it necessary to say now that he was not the YouTuber the story is about, but I feel that this is important to include for context. Doing some research for this story, he was the first YouTube channel to ever reach 5 million subscribers, so he was very popular at this time. In his show he reviewed viral videos, and as a teenager it was one of my favorite things to watch. Every week he picked one subscriber video to provide the comment question of the week, to which his subscribers would provide responses in the comment section. A friend and I thought we had a great question to ask and sent it in every week. After filming it, by the 4th or 5th week our video was selected and aired on that week's show. In hindsight, there definitely wasn't that much traffic coming into my account, but at the time it felt like it. I had 30-some messages in my message box at a time and quite a few comments on the original video. I can confidently say let's not meet to anyone in that comment section, garnering some very disgusting comments. My friend at the time was 13 and my message box didn't look much different now. As a teenager with low self-esteem, I was so pleased with a lot of this new attention. I was actually taking the time to respond to a lot of my messages, ignoring the disgusting ones, thanking people for congratulating me on getting picked, and occasionally starting up a conversation with some internet strangers. One of the most common questions I got asked after this video was, "How old are you?" And of course I offered up that information, because why wouldn't I? One specific person sticks out because he continued talking to me consistently every day, and every day I would have messages from him and I would respond. He was just chatting, just being nice. I thought he had a YouTube account, a small one, but had a couple thousand subscribers, having had 11 myself, all of which being friends. I thought it was so cool that his channel was quote-unquote successful. He asked me how old I was. I told him. He told me he was 21. It was initially quite tame for a conversation, but after a few weeks he asked me for my phone number. I'm naive. I gave it to him because he was so nice, and he didn't live anywhere near me. From what he told me, he lived several states away. Then he texted me all the time. He tried calling me around. Here is where I started to get creeped out. He began talking about wanting to meet me. Now at this point I had seemed to catch a predator in school, and I started getting somewhat suspicious. I never gave him more information than the state I lived in and my first name. That seemed innocent enough, but he started getting flirty and creepy and generally uncomfortable to talk to. I slowly stopped responding, ignored the phone calls, said I was busy. Then he found my social media accounts and tried talking to me there. I told him I had a boyfriend, which was a lie, but he still sent me some generally discomforting messages. Even looking back, this guy made me feel so uncomfortable that even thinking about it now, or seeing his username, makes me feel sick and tense. The message that really got me, the one that finally scared me enough, and the one I can actually remember after all these years, said, "I'm going to come to Ohio and find you, and when I finally do, I'm going to hug you so hard, I'm going to squeeze and squeeze you until your eyes pop out of your little head." I never told my parents, but I was lucky enough to be able to get my phone number changed. I started getting paranoid that he would find me checking the locks, closing the curtains. I removed him from my social media, changed my usernames and display names to make myself harder to find, because I was actually a teenager and my priorities were to be in contact with my actual friends all the time. Surprisingly, it got quiet for a while, and slowly I gained some feelings of safety back. I actually even started a new YouTube channel at the recommendation of some friends and started putting myself out there again, doing more media production, which I love, and garnering a small following of around 1,200 strangers, none of whom ever made me feel so unsafe. Thankfully, a few years Down the road, I started freshman year of college. I just turned 18, and wouldn't you know, he found me again, followed me on all social media, sent me messages again, posted some comments on my old YouTube channel. All at once, I felt so sick. I remember all the creepy messages and unsettling feelings and just generally breathlessness I had when he started telling me that he would find me and he was coming for me. I had a brief panic attack before swiftly blocking him on everything. My profile pictures were me at my new college wearing the gear and everything. I would have been significantly easier to find now, and I knew that I hardly made any friends that first year of college. I did leave my room much after that happened. I never went to parties. I scarcely made any friends. Every so often I remember the experience and I get sick. This is one of those times. I've since graduated. I've moved far away with my boyfriend. I still check my locks and curtains aggressively every night, sometimes 3 and 4 times, even if I'm sure that I had done it. What I'll never understand is how a grown man at 21 would be so interested in a 15-year-old girl, and especially still be interested after several years. The entire memory disgusts me. He still posts to that YouTube channel, and all I can think about is how he tried to get with me when I was a minor, a child. He was a predator. He took away my sense of safety. Up to this point, he's certainly on my top 10 list of people who I never want to encounter again, and I hope I truly never will have to. Story 22. For the past number of years, I've been working in a moderately sized amusement park in the middle of the city. I'm at the admissions desk, meaning that the work is quite administrative, answering the phones, responding to emails, and admitting customers. To the park being in the middle of the city, you do meet a lot of interesting characters, from old locals to traveling tourists. For the most part, I do enjoy the work that's involved, but every so often you would speak to a customer or receive a complaint, which doesn't really do much for staff morale. Yet I do always try my hardest to stay positive. Over the years, I've seen plenty of people stand in front of me at the front desks. There have been drunk stoners, happy to sad people, angry parents, and an abundance of complaints to top it all off. But in that time until last week, a customer had never angrily threatened me personally before. So for some context about how this conflict began, the specific amusement park which I work in has a family loyalty system in that you can purchase a ticket which is valid for a set number of people to visit the parks as many times as they'd like. Within 12 months, if they wished, they could come back to the park all 365 days of the year using this ticket. Now the catch is that it's only valid for the people who are named on the ticket, and there's also a photograph on the ticket once scanned through so that we can identify those people whose ticket is valid for when they arrive. Now some procedures are in place so that the tickets can't be misused, otherwise it could be passed around by neighbors and friends and families, and we would essentially be letting people into the park for free. Basically, let's say a group of 4 arrived to the park and only 2 were named on the ticket. Only those 2 would be allowed in under the ticket. The other 2 would need to pay for their admission. Now, if a ticket is given to the administrative staff member and no one present is named or photographed on the ticket, it will need to be retained by the staff and will be sent back to the owners with a warning. If it happens the second time, the ticket will be cancelled. With this in mind, last week a family of 4 approached my till and handed me one of these loyalty tickets. Upon scanning the ticket, I saw that none of those who were present in front of me were photographed on the ticket. The biggest giveaway was the father of the family, who on the photograph was in his mid-30s with cropped black hair. The man in front of me was in his late 50s, early 60s with long gray locks. Seeing this, I asked the guest if the ticket was theirs, as there was a different family in the photo in front of me, to which the father replied, "Yes, our friend sold it to us before they moved back to Poland. It's ours now," in one of those thickest Russian accents I've ever heard since starting my job there. Now selling or transferring these tickets is prohibited, especially without any notification to the amusement park beforehand, and 99 times out of 100 it was sold to us by our friends, is the excuse used when the ticket is just being borrowed amongst friends. After hearing this and clarifying that no one there had been on the ticket originally, I informed the father that unfortunately it would not be able to be used on this day, and the admission fee of $15 per person would need to be paid. The father asked for the ticket back, to which I told him I couldn't do. We would retain the ticket, and it would be mailed back to the original owners by ourselves. When he heard this, the father's demeanor changed completely, and he just held out his hand, ordering me to give back the ticket. I don't usually do well in confrontations, and try to avoid them when necessary, but the way he spoke just rubbed me the wrong way, and I insisted that it was out of my ability to give the ticket back. He once again ordered me to put the ticket back into his hand, pointing to his hand with an increasing level of anger in his voice that sent chills down my back. He even told me that he would personally give it back to the owners himself, despite them having moved to Poland. This continued back and forth for 1 or 2 minutes, and realizing it wasn't going to go anywhere by arguing with this man, I placed the ticket behind the counter and was looking for a loyalty ticket application form to show him where it states the consequences of misusing the tickets. As I was pulling out the form, the man lunged over the counter to grab the ticket. When I swiped the ticket onto the floor out of his reach, he then lunged once for me but couldn't reach. That's when I lost all patience with the man and raised my voice at him, telling him he just couldn't do that. I picked up the ticket and told him I was taken into the back office to be cancelled. At this stage, the security guard approached and told me to find a supervisor to talk to the man. I went into the back office to tell the supervisor what happened. They took the ticket and came back out onto the floor with me. The man was now in a heated argument with security over how I had stolen the card which he had bought originally. My supervisor checked the ticket once more, confirming that it was being misused, and told the man once again that the ticket was going to be cancelled. He proceeded to argue with her, growing more and more frustrated and changing his story from before. Apparently he was now the original owner of the ticket, and that he didn't know who the family in the photo were. It was clear that if his family hadn't been there, he would have picked a fight with her, the security guard, or myself. As he was starting to escalate into hysteria, after some time he calmed down enough to throw away $100 at me to pay for the $60 fee for his family. As I was handing him his change, he leaned in closely and said softly, "Remember this, the world is a small place. I will see you on the street one night and you will wish we had never met." He left, and I continued to serve 2 more customers in somewhat of a daze before the park manager came over to my till and invited me into the office to explain what had happened. After I explained the incident to the manager and told him what the man had said to me, at the end the manager called for a number of security guards to remove him from the park. This was achieved in less than 30 minutes with what has been described to me as violent opposition. I don't know how he was removed. I wasn't there to see it. Yet his family was allowed to remain in the park. The rest of the day went by without incident. The park opens until 8 p.m. usually, yet if it's particularly quiet upon closing time, some of the admission staff are allowed to leave early while the guests exit the park. On this day I was let go at 7:30 p.m. I don't have a car, but luckily my sister was on her way home from work and stopped by to pick me up. I waited in the office until she arrived, chatting with the supervisors and making light-hearted talk about what had happened during the day, until my sister texted me letting me know that she was right outside the admissions building. On my way out, I was scanning the car park for her car, and on my way over I saw the man from earlier, greasy gray hair, sitting in his car staring right at me, and he was watching me approach. For a split second I thought this was the very moment of reckoning he had been telling me about, before realizing that he was probably just waiting for his family to come out, since he hadn't left his car to teach me a lesson. Yet despite this, he never took his eyes off me as I passed his car and looked at me with nothing but pure hatred. I've genuinely never seen someone look at me that way before. and it half terrified me. A week or so has passed, and I haven't run into the man since. No phone calls or emails from him either, so I'm in the clear for now. Either way, to the angry Russian man with the gray hair who threatened me at work, you're not allowed at my park again. Story 23. I dog sit for a family friend. They much prefer to have somebody stay at the house with the dogs. I grew up in a town in the middle of nowhere, and I love the countryside, so for me this is like a staycation because I live in the city now. I never have any time to myself. Their house is in the middle of nowhere. When I say nowhere, I mean this place takes 2 hours to get to. From my work it is about 45 minutes to the nearest town. There is one neighbor within 5 miles, and he lives directly across the street. I'm used to this where I'm from. It's supposed to give you the space you need, but also help you to feel safer knowing you have at least one person nearby. However, this guy has done nothing but make me feel unsafe. I get to Terry and Johnny's house, and they're telling me the drill: when to feed the dogs, when to water the plants. Then as they're loading up their stuff to take it to the car, Terry says, "Oh, and don't forget to tell her about Steve." John says, "Oh yeah, don't worry about the neighbor across the street. He's harmless. The guy drinks a lot, and he's a little bit off, but totally harmless. Heck, the guy has lost his license so many times, all he can do is drive a moped to get to town. However, just in case, this is where we keep the guns. Steve has 3 don't tread on me Confederate flags and 2 plain Confederate flags, all of which are hanging from his porch. Of course, he's a little weird. He then takes me to his gun and explains that it's loaded, and if I were to use it, I don't need to cock it, just pull the trigger very hard. At this point I kind of brush it off. You keep a gun in your house when it takes police at least 45 minutes to get to your home still. I've got no worries. I'm used to drunk weirdos. I know how to handle them. I love this life in the middle of nowhere, and I've got 2 protective dogs that will attack on a 1-word command, so I'm feeling pretty safe. Terry and Johnny leave around 3 p.m. I took the dogs for a walk and played some frisbee and began to unload my stuff while they're still worn out from all the running. As I come back out for my second load of stuff, I'm staying there for a week and needed work clothes and my Xbox to keep me entertained. In the late evenings, I hear the neighbor Steve slam his door and seemingly having a phone conversation. I first just hear his voice faintly, then he yells, "Where did you go?" The dogs are hearing him now, and softly I say, "Calm down, boys, it's all right, just Steve. Remember, he probably wants some privacy. Let's go inside." As I grab my stuff, I hear him yell again, "I do care about my kids, screw you." And then I hear him throw something on the unpaved road behind me. Turns out to be his cell phone. As I'm grabbing my stuff, the dogs start going crazy and run a few feet behind me, barking and growling viciously. I drop my stuff and turn around to see the neighbor at the end of the driveway, probably 50 to 75 feet, just staring at me. I yell at the dogs to calm down and to go back inside. They do. I then give a friendly wave to Steve. In my head I'm thinking this is kind of weird, but he's probably been drinking. Plus they said the guy's harmless enough. Dogs have before never had a problem with the neighbors. He then takes a single step forward and says in a manipulative voice, "You all right?" Steve is wearing dirty jeans, work boots, a dirty red hoodie, and a red hat with a Confederate flag on it. He's also got dirty brown hair to his shoulders and a beard that's probably 5 inches long. Yeah, I'm pretty good. My name is Pip, just dog sitting for Johnny and Terry this weekend. Ready to go in and call it an evening with the boys. I look down at the dogs to see their reaction. They look like they're about to attack, and I've never seen them like this before. "How about yourself?" We sat in silence for about 30 seconds before he stated, "I'm asking if you're all right." "I'm Steve. Nice to meet you, Steve. Thanks for being a good neighbor and checking, but like I said, I'm good. Are you all right?" Again silence. Now this silence lasts for probably a whole minute, and I figure he's wasted. I should just get inside with my stuff, so I turn around and finish grabbing my stuff, and as I do, I hear him take one more step on the gravel driveway. The dogs bark again. I turn around, and Steve says, "I know them. Them dogs won't do nothing to me. They are some dang good dogs, that's for sure." I begin feeling very uneasy, so I close my trunk and turn around to see if he's going to say anything else. I was about to tell him that I was going inside and then instead awkwardly say, "Yeah, he cut me off, yeah." But he yelled. I was shocked, and I say, "Yeah, I'm going inside now. Thanks again for checking, Steve. I'm fine. I've got the dogs this week. Have a good night." I turn and go, and the dogs follow me with no problem. Steve continues to stand where I left him for literally 10 minutes, just staring at the house. This house does not have a front door. There is a side door and a back door. The back door is the main door because the front of the house has big green, fluffy privacy trees, so I can't even see his house. To the front window you can't see either doors. From the street you have to come out into the property to see them. It's about 6 o'clock, and where I'm at the sun starts going down around then, but doesn't actually get dark until around 9:15 p.m. During the summer the dogs and I are on the couch, and I've got my gaming headphones on while playing a video game online. All of a sudden the dogs start freaking out, running towards the back door, barking and growling. I'm thinking to myself, what's going on? They don't do that unless someone pulls up in their car and they don't know who it is. I'm not having anyone over, so I grab my knife, which is always close by, and start walking towards the back door. The dogs are still going crazy, and I have no idea what they're looking at. I don't see anything, but then I look closer. I see tail lights in the driveway, seemingly hiding behind my car. I then try and focus in and see that Steve is turned around, staring at the back of the house from his moped, ducking behind my car. I get the dogs to be quiet, and I hide to see what he is doing. The dogs are still growling, but at least they are not getting away. My location right now, I watch him for 5 minutes. No movement, just a creepy stare in my direction. I don't think that he can see me, but I'm not sure. He then shuts off his moped and crouches next to my car, where I can see him now peeking into my windows. When I lived in the country I never locked any doors, not my house, my car, nothing. Since I work and live downtown I naturally keep all of my doors locked at all times. I don't see him try and get into it, but he walks around it a few times. He's not crouching anymore. Obviously he feels like no one is watching him, or it gives a crap that he's looking into my car, but he is only taking a single step, stopping, looking into my car, then at the house. Then he repeats a single step at a time. Man, this is creepy. At this point I text Terry and tell her that Steve is doing some weird stuff, and I tell her I'm starting to feel weird and uncomfortable. I get a text back reading, "Call the cops if you feel unsafe. They know about him. They can come talk to him. Remind me to tell you about the time he was standing out by the tree at 6 a.m. when I was leaving for work. When we got back we think he had a psychotic break." How comforting. So I talk myself down some. This guy is just wasted. However, if he starts getting close to the door I'm calling the cops. It's a dumb idea looking back, because the police takes so long to get out. Here I'm as he's made his second round looking into my car. He then gets on his moped and drives off. As he passes the window that faces the driveway he sped up, trying to make it so I wouldn't see him if I was just watching TV. Now it's around 8 p.m. and the dogs start going crazy again. I look out, and now his moped is parked in plain view, and he is standing on the walkway just 30 feet from the house, staring and talking to himself. I had previously turned all the lights off so that he couldn't easily see in and see what I was doing. I see him take a single step towards the door, now 29 feet away. I grab the gun. I've called the dogs down, and they are in full-on protective mode. One dog to my left and one to my right. It's around 8:15 p.m. now, and I call the cops. I explain the situation and that the owners think he had a psychotic break. As I'm halfway through explaining why I'm starting to fear for my safety, the operator says, "Ma'am, what's your address again?" I tell her, and then I tell her my address. "I'm sorry ma'am, but your Not located in our county. I will have to transfer you to a different county. Are you serious? The owner said that the cops in this area know him very well and know how to handle him. Isn't that you guys? Yes, ma'am, that is us, but you are located in a different county. That's not our jurisdiction. The operator then transfers me to another county. When she answers the phone with the average 911, what's your emergency? I'm silent. I'm looking out the kitchen window, and Steve has come up about 4 or 5 feet since the last time I looked out there. 911, what's your emergency? I then explain what's happening and explain that I was transferred because I'm apparently not in their jurisdiction. She then tells me to remain calm and turn all the lights on. I said, yeah, right, this guy is waiting for me to do something like that. The doors are all locked and I do have a firearm. If he enters, I'm going to shoot him. She then tells me that it's safest with the lights on, so I turn the lights on. He notices, turns and gets on his moped and drives back to his house. I tell her what happened. She asks if I would still like to have an officer come out. Absolutely, I want an officer to come out. Apparently the cops in your county know him, but she transferred me to you. This is the 3rd time he's coming to the property and he's getting closer and closer to the door. I don't feel safe. Someone that is not me needs to talk to this guy. Calm down, ma'am. We will still send somebody. However, based on where you're located, it might take a while for one to get out there. That's fine. I just want somebody out here. Thank you. I asked her if she would stay on the line until he got there or no. She says that one is on its way out, but she needs to be available if anyone calls, and she told me if he comes back, and I'm still uneasy to call them without hesitation. It's about 9 p.m. now, and the sun is getting ready to set completely. Again, the dogs go crazy. Now I'm getting really mad and walking around the house with a loaded gun so that if Steve sees me, he sees that gun too. I look out the window and see his moped, but I don't see him. Where is he? From the window in the kitchen. I can't see the back door, so I go upstairs. One dog follows and the other is too old to climb the stairs, and I peek down through the bathroom window. Steve is on the back porch lighting matches and throwing them down on the wooden porch. He doesn't seem harmless anymore. He's talking to himself and twisting his head back and forth like he's getting warmed up to fight or have a conversation with another one of his personalities or something. I start filming him from the upstairs window just in case I die, so that I could hide my phone, and then when they find it, they'd know it had to be this guy. The sun is down and it's starting to get dark. He steps up to the door and starts knocking. He then starts pounding on the door. I'm pretty good at staying calm in a situation, but my heart started beating so fast that my Fitbit had to change my heart rate tab every 2 seconds. If he gets in here, I'm going to have to kill this guy or he is going to kill me. I could see pure hate in his eyes. Then he stops pounding at the door, quickly turns away and runs to his moped, starts it, and takes off faster than I thought a moped could go. Not even a minute later, the cops pull into the driveway. I had mentioned to the dispatch operator that I have 2 dogs who will bark at the officer but will not attack unless given a specific word. They are trained, and I do have a firearm. I will leave the firearm inside. When I go to meet the officer, I met the officer. The dogs didn't growl, simply gave a single bark to let me know that someone was here. I went outside to meet him and told him that the guy just took off on a moped. He says, oh yeah, I just passed him when I turned onto the road. I explained that he is an absolute drunk or crazy, and if he sees him on his way back, that he should definitely pull him over, because I'm quite positive he's under the influence of something. Normal people don't just act that way. The cop basically shrugs everything off and says, well, are you going to stay the night here? I told him no, I will leave the dogs overnight and come back in the morning. I asked him to stay a while I packed everything up, and he nodded. I go inside, give the dogs love and treats, and create them for the night. I take off and return the next day with my dad. My dad begins walking the perimeter to try and show him that I is also staying here. I'm a 24-year-old female. If you're Wondering then Steve wearing that same dirty outfit and hat while holding a 24 case of Budweiser is standing at the end of the driveway again. I'm watching him from the front window. I see my dad at the other end of the yard. As he comes into view, Steve turns around and walks back to his house. I later learned that Steve has been to jail multiple times due to domestic abuse. His kids are not allowed to see him due to his violent nature, and he bought a four-wheeler. No one knows how he gets his money to get these things. Terry and Johnny have never seen him leave for work. They've only seen him leave on his moped or four-wheeler empty-handed for an hour or two and return with a case or two of beer. I don't know who he thought he was, but every time he looked at that house in my direction there was just pure hate in his eyes. Who knows what would have happened if I didn't call the cops as early as I did, but from now on if I have to dog sit, it definitely won't be at those people's house. Story 24. I got really lucky with my random roommate in college. My roommate Mandy and I've ended up becoming best friends. We still are, although we live in different parts of the world now. We keep in touch fairly often, and I know I can always depend on her if I need her. About 2 to 3 months into freshman year, everything was going well. We were going out together every weekend and both dating around. I knew that before we went to college she had been in a relationship and she would still talk to her ex-boyfriend on and off. Her boyfriend Shane was in the military at that time. I think he was in Germany. She didn't straight up say that he was abusive to her, and it even took her years later to admit that he was, but it was obvious from her stories that he was a scary guy. I don't think that he ever got physically violent with her, but I remember that she told me one time he threatened her that if she cheated on him he would send black girls to her house with knives. Pretty weird and racist, but sending anybody to your house with knives is scary. Also, anytime that she attempted to completely cut off contact with him and block his number on social media, he would make hundreds of accounts and even email her to harass her. Obviously, from what she told me, it was clear that this guy was a piece of crap. I think Mandy talked to him online a lot more than she ever told me at this time, and he was in the background of my mind because I had never met him, and she was seeing a few other guys at our college. About halfway through the year we stopped hanging out as much. Basically there was a fight in our friendship group and we took different sides. We weren't mad at each other, but there was definitely a bit of a divide through the year. I had met tons of people at parties when I was drunk and didn't remember all of them. As a result, if I saw someone request me on Facebook who went to my college, I assumed we had already met, and I accepted them. One of the girls' names was Vanessa. I don't remember exactly when she added me, but she slowly started messaging me and would ask what I was doing on the weekend. I wouldn't reply too much, or because I already had friends to go out with and wasn't keen to meet up with people that I didn't remember. Vanessa's photos were a bit more provocative, nothing too out there, but just a little bit sexier than average. There was also another girl, Manny, who had added me. I didn't really remember adding her either, but she would also message me from time to time and ask what I did for fun. From her profile it looked like she didn't go to my college but was going to go there the next semester. She looked a bit more innocent and basic. I thought I was being nice and helping by replying back to her since she was going to be a new student there soon. One night I was chilling and smoking with my friends when Vanessa messaged me. She said something like, "Me and my man are in town. We have a hotel room. You want to meet up?" I actually would be into having a threesome, but I was pretty sketched out since I didn't really know this girl or her boyfriend. I'm very high at this point when suddenly this girl sends about 100 pictures of her performing a specific act on her boyfriend. I was completely taken by surprise and disgusted. No one likes a picture like that. The weird part was that they were all the same picture, not a bunch of different pictures, but literally 100 of the same picture. Then once I opened the photo I realized it was kind of a timeline thing, like how you see at the bottom of the screen when you're watching the show, and it shows how much time is left. So this was from an adult video that someone paused, screenshot, and sent to me 100 times. I was completely freaked out and immediately I blocked the girl. I went back to the room and told my roommate about it and tried to brainstorm who it might be that would catfish me and send those photos. I was actually worried that it might be the roommate who shared the same suite as us. She was in her own room, but we all shared a bathroom. She was obese and had really strange pictures of herself on Facebook. She was always nice in person, but we never talked that much. Right when that happened, my roommate Mandy mentioned there was some weird stuff on her toothbrush, so I thought maybe this girl was trying to sabotage us or something. Then a couple of days later, Manny, the innocent Facebook girl who had been messaging me, asks, "So do you ever hook up with girls?" I immediately blocked her to another catfish. Pretty sure no real girl would actually say that. Later that week, some girl added me on Facebook. I could tell straight away that it was a fake account, but I checked out the profile and saw her likes were all stuff to do with the military. Over the next few weeks, a bunch of obviously fake accounts tried to add me on Facebook and Instagram. They all had similarities. They all had sexy pictures, had some mention of the military, and were saying that they were lesbian or bi. The military connection is what stuck out to me, and I realized it was probably Mandy's boyfriend. When I asked her about it, she admitted straight away that she thought it was him too. Someone had been adding her from a ton of fake accounts as well. I think she was too embarrassed to say that it was probably him from the beginning. This all happened between 2012 and 2013. Now I can spot a fake account from a mile away. I received Facebook requests from accounts that I could tell were shamed for years. After that, he had a way of targeting certain people. He would add the last 50 or so people you added, so then when he would request to follow you, you saw that you had mutual friends and figured that's how you knew each other. Apparently over time he did that to all of Mandy's friends. The crazy part, I'm the only one who it didn't work on. Even her cousin, who was the same age as us, ended up sending naked photos to him disguised as girls online. Mandy and I have talked about it a lot, and she thinks it's a sick way of trying to tell who her real friends are. He has two kids now with some girl, and he still will message me from Mandy's fake account, but will never admit that it's him even when she calls him out. Story 25. For a little context, I moved out from my family home around 10 months ago to go to a university across the country. I have very crazy hair color and very long hair, so I've been noted by both friends and strangers many times about it, and about how easy I am to spot from afar. Anyways, I got myself a tiny first-floor apartment in a building in a very calm and family-friendly area around the city. Because of this, I did not feel too unsafe about living on the first floor, considering that my bedroom had a big window with transparent curtains only about half a meter up from the ground, looking into a small grassy hill leading into a foresty area behind the building. I was quite excited about moving out for the first time, so I happily overlooked this fact and the rude landlady. Besides, this city is within the circle, meaning that since it was summertime there was midnight sun. Also noteworthy, it would eventually be no sun at all for about 2 months during winter time. The landlady told me both and the other female student that I lived with at the small area behind the apartment building that our windows looked into were off limits. No one would ever walk there, so it was supposedly safe to keep the curtains open at all times. In order to reach this area, a person has to either climb over a 3-meter tall wooden fence that went below the area ground, or climb this about 2 meters off a ground wall leading up to the foundation level and the grassy area outside my window. There's nothing in this area but a stripe of grass, and in wintertime deep masses of snow that goes all the way up to the window. A few weeks after moving in, I started feeling a little creeped out for seemingly no reason. I would sit at my desk and read and feel as if someone could be watching me from behind the trees on the other side of the fence. As it started getting darker, I realized that anyone from the outside could easily watch me, as if I lived in an aquarium when the apartment was all lit up. Then one day, as stupid as it sounds, I was trying to get a good selfie light in front of the window when a man suddenly walked by. It really startled me, and I almost dropped my phone by the surprise. So I sat down for a moment and laughed to myself, thinking about how silly it must have looked with me pressed up against the Window. All consumed with myself, I tried to reason with myself that it was probably just some man taking a shortcut to somewhere else, or maybe it was the caretaker of the building, so I just drew the curtains together and left it at that. From then on, every now and then I would suddenly see the man walking past my window. Always when the curtains were open. It would happen when I was sitting at my desk studying, or sitting in my bed watching TV. I could see someone from the corner of my eye walk by slow enough for me to turn and register it to be the same fully grown kind of gray-haired man in a blue jacket, but it was never long enough for me to take notice in his facial features or anything distinctive. If I walk in there, you could get a full view of my room and me sitting at my desk. At the time, I started thinking about the landlady's claim that no one was supposed to ever be walking back there, so I asked my roommate if she had noticed anyone walking out there too. She laughed too, asking if I was even sure that I saw someone. Now, these events did not happen that often, but often enough for me to really start wondering if it was not just a shortcut that this man was taking. I half-jokingly texted my parents about it, telling them I was an easy victim. With the aquarium window and transparent curtains, my mother naturally freaked out and decided to send me some non-see-through light-blocking curtains before they ever arrived. I started noticing that this man did not just walk by my window once, sometimes maybe half a minute later he would return from the other way and then walk by again. I have to point out once more how narrow this area is, making it so that his jacket would almost slide across my window while walking past. After the new curtains arrived, the problem seemed to be solved. I could finally sleep at night again and thought no more of it. Lived my life unbothered until I finally went back to my hometown for Christmas. It was when I returned back that I realized something was definitely going on. I had began dating a guy and brought him home to watch movies during which the curtains were open, and it was pitch black outside one night where, for unknown reasons, I felt very restless and my insomnia was just more terrible than usual. I woke up around 5 a.m. and peeked out the window to see deep and large footprints in the snow stopping very close in front of my window. They also led across the area, but judging from the shape of the footprints, it seemed this person had walked back and forth. Now, this alone is very creepy, the idea that someone had been standing there close to the window trying to peek through the gaps of the curtains. But there was more yellow snow everywhere under the window, yellow drops on my window sill. This psycho had pissed on my window. I was exhausted and tired, so I did not think it through right away. I just told myself it was indeed nasty and creepy, but perhaps it was just some guy stumbling home drunk after a night out and needed to relieve himself. As I woke up more, though, I realized that it was very illogical for a drunk to manage to climb his way up there, not to mention that he would choose a window instead of a wall. As the sun went up, I looked out the window more, and it just seemed way too determined that someone would just choose my window out of the row. It seemed kind of personal and angry. I was living alone at this point too, as my roommate had moved out a few months earlier. The curtains into her room were always open, and as I went to check, the footprints had just walked right past the window towards mine. While trying not to freak myself out too much, I thought about previous suitors and all that, people that might be pissed off that I was seeing someone new, but it really did not fit their character. Then I remembered that man who had been walking outside my window in the months after I first moved in. Maybe he had been watching me this entire time and did this to mark his territory or something sick like that. As for recently, things did not work out with the guy I was seeing, and since then nothing more as far as I can tell. Now that the snow is melting, it's hard to tell if somebody is out there at night, and I always keep my curtains closed. I'm still freaked out, and I wanted to color my hair back to a normal color so I wasn't so noticeable. I can't wait to return to my hometown again for the summer so I can finally feel safe while sleeping at night. I could finally sleep at night again and thought no more of it, lived my life unbothered until I finally went back to my hometown for Christmas. It was when I returned back that I realized something was definitely going on. I had began dating a guy and brought him home to watch movies during which the curtains were open, and it was pitch black outside one night where, for unknown reasons, I felt very restless, and my insomnia was just more terrible than usual. I woke up around 5 a.m. and peeked out the window to see deep and large footprints in the snow stopping very close in front of my window. They also led across the area, but judging from the shape of the footprints, it seemed this person had walked back and forth. Now this alone is very creepy, the idea that someone had been standing there close to the window trying to peek through the gaps of the curtains. But there was more yellow snow everywhere under the window, yellow drops on my window sill. This psycho had pissed on my window. I was exhausted and tired, so I did not think it through right away. I just told myself it was indeed nasty and creepy, but perhaps it was just some guy stumbling home drunk after a night out and needed to relieve himself. As I woke up more, though, I realized that it was very illogical for a drunk to manage to climb his way up there, not to mention that he would choose a window instead of a wall. As the sun went up, I looked out the window more, and it just seemed way too determined that someone would just choose my window out of the row. It seemed kind of personal and angry. I was living alone at this point too, as my roommate had moved out a few months earlier. The curtains into her room were always open, and as I went to check, the footprints had just walked right past the window towards mine. While trying not to freak myself out too much, I thought about previous suitors and all that, people that might be pissed off that I was seeing someone new, but it really did not fit their character. Then I remembered that man who had been walking outside my window in the months after I first moved in. Maybe he had been watching me this entire time and did this to mark his territory or something sick like that. As for recently, things did not work out with the guy I was seeing, and since then nothing more as far as I can tell. Now that the snow is melting, it's hard to tell if somebody is out there at night, and I always keep my curtains closed. I'm still freaked out, and I wanted to color my hair back to a normal color so I wasn't so noticeable. I can't wait to return to my hometown again for the summer so I can finally feel safe while sleeping at night. Thank you for listening, and I wish you good health. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support us. Thank you very much.